Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the VonDubCast. Today's guest is Bill Pickering. He's another of my university buddies. He was a couple years older than me when I met him. You'll get to hear the story, kind of how we met and what role he took in sort of changing my trajectory of where I was going in my little university residence bubble. So yeah, it was very interesting to get to catch up with him again. He's moved down currently to the United States. He did a after degree down in Oklahoma, is now working down in Texas. Also in the oil and gas industry. I know I've had a lot of these kind of guys on, and hopefully soon I'll have maybe some people on the other side of the spectrum to come on and maybe push back on some of these points, get a little bit of a well-rounded view on some of these more hot-button issues like environment and how the oil and gas industry fits into the 21st century. But besides that, we talk about many different topics, and we really try to do our best to illuminate everybody to what Lister was like, and more specifically the Dodgeball League, the LDL within Lister, and just what a force it was in trying to get people to understand just how serious everyone took it and how important it was to everybody there. It's very it's kind of a silly subject to talk about a dodgeball league like that, but it was very important. People really put everything on the line for it while they were there, and anybody that you talk to that's ever been in Lister can say the same thing. So it's really hard to explain to people that are outside of it, but we did our best. I figured Bill would be one of the best people to have on to kind of have that talk and maybe give an example, just because we both did run the league in an executive position like you'll hear on the podcast. So talk about that a little bit. Again, yeah, some oil and gas, some politics, some current events, and it was a really nice sit down. I hadn't talked to Bill for more than maybe a couple minutes in probably 5 or 6 years, so I really enjoyed sitting down with him, and I hope you guys get to enjoy the conversation we had as well. So like always, if you want to send any feedback, send it to VonDubCast@gmail.com, and sit back and enjoy. To the end, to the TRO, we got the intro music, yeah. All right, welcome, Bill. Episode 5. You're the lucky guest on this one today. How's she feel?
She's good to be here, little Nikki. I missed you, buddy. It's been too long.
Yeah. I was thinking when I was trying to think of first guests that I really like to talk to and stuff, and that I haven't got to catch up with in such a long time. You were top of the list there. So for those that don't know, I met Bill back in university. I was in my my first year, and Bill was what year would you have been in that? 3?
Oh, I think I was in my third year. Yeah, because you took over the LDL after that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yes, sir. That's right. We're going to start. So, as you've heard mentioned on the podcast before a couple times, if you're a repeat listener, we both went through the LDL, which is the Lister Dodgeball League. It was at the U of A. It was kind of a residence sport that we kind of took on and ran with, and it was everything to everybody. That was the motto for all these people. And then you leave Lister, and you can't explain to anybody just what a craze it was, how much everybody cared about what it was and what we were doing there. It was amazing to see with people, but it's so hard once you're out of it to explain it to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured that was also another perfect opportunity. If I'm going to take a stab at it to try and explain just what it is, I might as well bring on the person that brought me there in the first place. And I kind of just wanted to tell a little story to kick it off about. I was in my first year. Was all in on dodgeball. I loved it from the second I started it. It was just a craze that you can't really explain to people just how much it means to everybody, because you're living with these people. It's like being in a hockey league, but also you live with these people. You spend every day with them. You know every person on every team. You go out drinking with them after, and it's just this incredible sport that brings in both male and females. It's the most inclusive sport and the most uninclusive sport. Just which I'm sure we'll get into some of it. I like to think of it as the kind of a PC person's worst nightmare, because it's a sport where there's defined roles of throwers and shaggers, right? There's people who go out and try and throw the balls, get people out, and then there's another role that kind of sits back, tries to get the balls from rolling back on the other side and control the flow of the game, which is quite different than most sports that have kind of a predominant male-female split on what the roles do. That includes everybody, because the shaggers are just as important as the throwers, if not more so. In a typical game, you'll see the throwers go out, they target the shaggers right away, because if you go out, throw, you miss everything, they catch every ball, now there's every ball coming back at you. Whereas if you can take out their shaggers, now you can cycle the balls, get the balls back. But the opposite side of that too is you have to decide, you have to go out there and have these 19, 20-year-old kids go out and decide count how many males and females are out on the floor at once, which was a whole hullabaloo that I don't know how we avoided and didn't have. I think a couple years later, I don't know how they're doing it now. I haven't looked back at the league, but
Hmm.
anyways, getting a little beside myself. It was just this amazing league that I was um, really passionate about, but I was a little scared to jump into it with both feet. And there's a position. There's three people at that time that would run the LDL. Right? There was a rules exec. Who else was
Yeah.
it? Was a
There was rules, officiating, and external.
right, and they all had their predetermined roles, and that was kind of something. If you were in Lister for a couple years and you wanted to come back as one of the more senior roles within the residents, and you would run this entire dodgeball league, those three people would run this league of about 15 to 1600 people at a
Hmm.
crack. Right, is a big budget. Everyone pays in. You have a
Yeah.
budget about $50,000 that you're working with, and
It was closer to 70 by the time we were done, but regardless, yeah.
yeah, it was a for
More every, yeah.
yeah, for three 20 something year old kids trying to run a league like that, having a budget like that, having staff, it was quite the thing. And in my first year, I was terrified to jump into it. I knew it was something that I really wanted to do, but I was just telling myself, no, I'll do it in my that's a third year thing, right? I can't do that as a second year. I still am just getting my feet under me. So then at one point, I don't know what you guys saw, but you, Bill, and Brandon both pulled me aside, brought me to a bar with a nice bucket of beer, and sat me down and just pretty much told me that I was going to be applying for the position next year and that I didn't have anything to say about it. And it probably took you guys 2 days to get me actually onto the side of where I'm going to apply for it, right? And I was so nervous, and I I just couldn't get my head together in that interview. I'm sure you remember it was probably the worst interview. It still haunts me to this day. Uh, I think about it probably once a month, just how bad I did. But it was because I cared so much and I wanted that job so badly. And I just can't thank you enough, because we walked out of it. There was a couple people on the panel. It wasn't straight up to you guys. There was some other factors that had to go into it, and they really didn't want me in that position, for how I understand it. And you guys had to go in, argue, and fight for it. And I'm so glad that you did, because that set me on a whole different path. What I like to tell people is I got a 4-year business degree from the U of A, but really I learned all of the business skills running that dodgeball league. If I'm honest,
Mhm.
I learned way more about how to hire, how to fire, how to uh, work with different dynamics, different people that have different ways of
Mhm.
doing things. It was an amazing learning experience that I very almost didn't get into. And I just wanted to start this off kind of with telling people how much that meant to me, and just saying a big heartfelt thank you, because that really set me off onto a path. But yeah,
Well,
so I don't know.
it was just paying it forward, Nick, because Brennan did it for me at a certain point, and
Right.
I saw you as an individual that I knew would excel in that role, and I wanted to pay it forward, and I mean, you would have done the same thing. You did do the same thing. I mean, we always under
Right.
our we're always looking for who's going to be the next representative, and it is. You're right. It's such a weird thing to try to explain to people, and if people
Hmm.
are listening, they've made it this far listening to dodgeball, trying to wrap their head around it. I give them
Yeah.
credit. That might be one of the better analogies I've ever heard, Nick, about it's like a hockey league all inside one building living together. And you're
Hmm.
right. For 8 months, you don't leave each other's side. You
Hmm.
play with each other. You sleep in rooms beside each other. You socialize with each other. You go out to the bar with each other. You plan all your social outings with each other.
Hmm.
A good portion of you probably even take classes with each other.
Right.
It's capable, and it seems odd to think. And then what you do is you compound on top of that. You take all these 18 and 19 year olds that their first experience of freedom,
Hmm.
got a little bit of mom and dad's cash in the bank account,
Yeah.
or a little bit of their own, whoever's they're unfortunate enough to be spending at the time, I guess. But and then you just give them freedom and
Hmm.
say, be responsible, have fun. It's pretty cool, but you're right. And I've circled back. I still keep it on my damn resume. Do you?
What's that?
I still put LDL on my resume.
Oh, of course. Yeah, for sure. That was, I mean, when I was first applying fresh out of school, that was my biggest thing on there, was that, you can throw out the budget that you were working with, the amount of staff you have. It looked really good on the resume. But even still, once you get into an interview and you tried, like you say, try and explain to somebody you ran a dodgeball league, it just doesn't compute with people, right?
No.
And one of the other things I thought was so amazing about that dodgeball league too was you could watch. You could watch people that clearly were not athletic up until that point throughout high school, whatever it was, or
Yeah.
a lot of the time you saw people that may not have been traditionally athletic, but were extremely skilled at the sport once they gave it a try. And it seems so clear to me that there were so many people out there that were just either told at one point as a child or
Yeah,
when they're coming up that they're not athletic, and they kind of turned off all the way from it. Um, or else they just would never give themselves enough time to fail. I'm sure there was lots of kids that also just jumped into something, wasn't good at it right away. But then you see people that go into it, they stick with it because of all those other aspects that come with it. It's not just that they love dodgeball, love everything that comes with it. It's
yeah,
the camaraderie. It's all those things that you're doing it with your floor that you live with. It's your team. It's very patriotic almost to what the cause is, and you see people actually stick with it for a couple weeks after week. You get some
yeah,
practice and they stick with it, and they become amazingly confident. You see them change as a people purely because of that. I'm sure it's also that change of becoming your own person, having your own freedoms. I'm sure that has a huge deal to it, but I don't think it can be understated just how much that being able to shine on a physical stage for probably the first time in hundreds of those kids' lives. You can see from day one the people that played football in high school and they can throw a ball and they're athletic and they get out there, and lots of times they're not very good at dodgeball. Right? It's a very different sport where, especially with the rule set that was set up, where we tried to really emphasize, right, like catching didn't make the other person out, right? So you couldn't
yeah,
just have people who would be scared to throw. It's just if you catch it you didn't get hit, right? And that really encourages people to learn how to dodge, learn how to move, and it makes all these other aspects where it's just throwing and catching, where maybe a traditional sports athlete would be tailor made for it. But now you add in this whole other aspect, not even to mention all the shagging and strategy that goes with it. But you see these kids shine and get this whole new confidence. And sometimes it works out for the worst and sometimes it works out for the better, because you can see people where they've clearly never had this in their lives and they stick around
yeah,
maybe a little longer than they needed to, right? They're already graduated, they're coming back, and you see that. But it seems so clear to me that it's purely because you've never experienced that in your life. You've never been on top. You've never had adulation like that for a physical conquest. And to watch people do that, it's just amazing to see all these people that would have never even known that they had an athletic bone in their body have this weirdo sport that they never even thought, like, well, who thinks they're ever going to be in a professional or not professional, but a very serious dodgeball league like that. And then you get to see them flourish like that. It's amazing to me to watch what it was. And I think that's the hard part to explain to people, is all these other things that come with it, and what an experience it was for these people that go through it. And to a T, it's really hard to explain to people outside of Lister, but anybody that went to Lister knows
yeah.
it off the top, right? You can't not get it when you are involved, and even some people that would come and visit a lot could
Yeah.
somewhat wrap their mind around just how crazy it was, right? And then there's all stars, and we'll get into that. But kind of just what I wanted to ask you is, the story of me becoming an LDL exec quite well because you were so involved. But I don't know if I ever got to hear the story of how you did it, because you did it in your second year too. And I think that was one of the big things that I was so worried about. I thought, I
Yeah.
can't do it. That's a third and fourth year position, right? I can't do that second year. But you said that you had done it, so just maybe walk me through how that worked.
Yeah, totally, buddy. So, I'm only 2 years older than you, and just like you, I showed up as doe-eyed at the U of A's campus as anybody else does, and like anybody else who goes through Lister, you get acquainted with dodgeball very quickly, and you learn about the community. And I mean, I wasn't a good player. It's the old adage, those who become
Yeah,
food teach, and I couldn't play, so I figured out pretty damn quickly I had to be an admin.
yeah. There you go.
No, it was honestly, it didn't really dawn on me that maybe this was something. I think, like a lot of first years, you think about being a floor coordinator or a residence advisor, or
Right.
some of the more, I guess, available roles.
Yeah,
Um,
traditional.
yeah, and the LDL was something really different. So it was probably actually around the beginning of the second semester, I started asking a lot of questions to Murph, and he was my predecessor in the budgeting role for the league, and he really walked me through it. And I mean, similar to you, I don't think there was one specific lunch with beers or dinner with beers. There might have been weeks or weekends or months
Mhm.
or who knows how long. There was a lot of coaxing that went on, and I was a little easier. I told him I was going to do it right off the hop, but I
Mhm.
was I was shadowing, asking a lot of questions. And I'll be honest with you, the first dodgeball game I ever refed was the JP Cup finals in my second.
Wow.
I never I never refed the game, and they were short side refs, so they called me down to Ratchet. And for those of you listening that don't know, there will be hundreds of people in this gym out of this tiny community, and
Packed.
yeah, and they're streaming it too now. Like
Hmm.
they would film it, edit it, put it online for viewing parties later. But now it's streamed live. I mean, anybody can
Yeah.
watch it. So yeah, that was kind of my baptism under fire into the LDL. But it was a quick learning curve. The one
Hmm.
difference did have from you is that I was the first year where we experimented with external executives,
Right.
so people that weren't living within the residence
Oh,
community.
right, right. So, and you weren't living in Lister in my first year. You were an external.
Yeah, yeah. So I was the only one living in Lister that year, which it was the first year we allowed externals, and it very abruptly became the year we made the rule that only one external would be allowed at a time, one person outside.
Right, right. Oh, right.
Um,
Because in my first year, that was your second year as an exec. You had done it the year before.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. So in your first year, who's the other two execs that were external in your first year?
Yeah, so their names are Zach Skabar and Taylor Roca, and
Oh,
both
right, right.
you've probably heard of them. Both
Yeah.
great guys, both stars, both legacies in the league, and both Hall VPs at one point. Taylor now works for the WHL, and I'm pretty sure he's senior in the marketing role of some level. But
Hmm.
anyways, he's a very interesting, and he tried to make the LDL into a hockey style bracket. That was his influence, and it
Right.
didn't go so well, but it worked famously well, and that so many people had talked about it, and now we tried it and we got it out of the way. The
Yeah.
other individual was Zach Skabar, who I believe still lives in Edmonton somewhere. He's he's got a dad named Merlin and a sister named Letitia, and he's the whitest guy I've ever met. I love it. But
That's hilarious.
yeah, he still lives around, and he was external, and you know, both guys, no knock against them. The reality is just you needed more boots on the ground to manage the league.
Hmm.
And,
Well, that same thing happened in the year I did it. Both the other execs were external, and at the start of the year it worked out really good. But definitely towards the end of the year, when they had finals, they were both older in their third and fourth years, I think, or maybe they're both in their
yeah,
fourth year at that point. School started to take precedence, and it turned into me doing most of the day-to-day roles and kind of taking the whole
yeah,
thing on, which is really where I learned the most. And that's kind of the grinding spot where I learned more than I like to think. And probably half my business degree was in that real
oh
crunch
yeah,
time where, like you say, high learning curve, figure it out, right?
yeah,
Hearing you say that you shadowed a little bit the year before to kind of see what the job was like. I wish I would have done that, because
yeah,
when I jumped into it, it was pretty much figure it out at that point, right? You're coming up with the whole schedule. You're coming up with any rule changes, any of that kind of stuff
yeah.
on that side. And it was very bumpy to say the least, but you learned so quickly, and I really enjoyed that. But
I should add, Nick, when I say I shadowed, I meant I went and sat with Brennan in the gym, and I went to Duke's, and I had beers in the office. I wasn't
yeah.
crunching budgets, and much like you know, you had to figure that all out on your own, and I'm sure much like you too, I figured out what didn't work a lot of the time, and
Hmm.
honestly,
Hmm.
that's just about as valuable as knowing what does work, because
Hmm.
yeah, I learned a lot of ways not to do things right, and that
Yeah.
proved fruitful later on in life. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was an interesting experience.
And I think it's funny to look at the past execs, just because that position did have so much that went into it, and from what I saw, so much to teach you, and then to see the people that were execs and where they are now, you see a lot of really successful
You
paths
do.
that were taken out of there, right? And that I think it's underrated just how much you learn in that role. I mean, we did get paid to do that role. That was one of
Yeah,
the few paid roles within the residence that you could do, but it wasn't much. It was $300 a month, and for the
yeah,
hours you put in and the amount of heart that you put into the job, it's not much. But for the learning, I mean, you pretty much you couldn't pay enough for a degree to teach you everything that taught me,
you
right? And
love it,
that,
right? You have the best time doing it. I mean, it's and I mean, there's no way we can talk about it, Nick, without talking
oh,
about the sadistic Machiavellian mind
mm-hmm,
space you get in as an exec, because it's an unelected position, pseudo governed by an elected body that has
mm-hmm,
since been disbanded and doesn't really exist. So you filled this auspicious role, you had access to power, and it was the only thing this 1,800 student cohort that were your immediate best friends and were the only people you dealt with cared about.
mm-hmm, yeah,
And you were, and especially when you're in a situation like you and I were, you know, what you say goes. There wasn't time to call and have a conference with people outside of the building. It
mm-hmm,
sounds dramatic for a fucking dodgeball league, but it was, you know, people were, you were somebody because you were an LDL
mm-hmm.
exec, which is just fuck to think about.
Yeah, and there's nothing that goes into it to see what kind of person, right? In the interview process, you're not going to see what that power goes to your head, and you almost can't even. It was almost taboo to even bring that up of what it was. But we got to see many people go the wrong way with it. It's a lot of
Oh
power,
yeah,
and I got to watch many people, myself too. I talked about it on the
oh,
last podcast. There was parts of things that I look back on and how I treated people with that power going to your head that you don't like, and you would kind of wish if I could go back maybe I'd do it differently.
Yeah.
But what it took for me was kind of the whole first year I didn't realize it, but then I went back for the second year. I got to see some more people handle it, and I got to see that power. I had already done it for you, and then you get to watch these people that you knew
Yeah.
for all this time, and then you get to watch them go in that role and watch the power go to their heads and watch. And I think that showed me a lot of, oh, I really don't like that in them, but I can
Yeah.
see that in myself. I was probably this way all of last year. You like you say, you have the power over everybody. Is diehard. They will do anything to for dodgeball. Dodgeball is everything to everyone. That was the motto of Lister, right? And you have that, and there's three people that run that whole thing that have the say to change it. It's an immense
Yeah.
amount of power. And like you say, you come in at 19 years old, you have that thrust upon you, and you can be really great with it. You can do great things. You can bring a great sport to many people, make a lot of people happy, or you can piss off a lot of people, which we got to see many people, go in
And
there,
both,
try and,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, we got to see the ill effects of it. But just
Yeah.
kind of going back into that, just to try and give people an example of what it looks like. So you'd come into Lister as a first year. At what point would you learn about dodgeball? I mean, people are telling you right when you move in. That's all you hear as a
Oh,
first year. If you didn't know anything about Lister, you're coming in, you move onto your floor, and the second and third years that are there coming back in, they welcome you. Hey, this is gonna be a family. This is where all the stuff is. And have you ever played dodgeball before? And you kind of get,
yeah.
dodgeball. What? I mean, I was in a lucky position because my sister went there 2 years
Yeah.
before. I kind of went into it already knowing I had gone to a couple practices of hers when I was
Mhm.
in high school, and got to see a little bit of what it was, and got to see how crazy everyone takes it. And when I was in high school, I was like, that is the dumbest stuff. Like, how are you guys playing dodgeball? I was like, this is so stupid. Like, when I
Yeah.
get there, I'm sure I'll play, but I won't be that into it, right? And immediately you get there. But just for the first year experience that doesn't come in with that, you come in blind with no knowledge. I know we did. I don't remember my first year, but I know in the 2 years that I
Yeah.
was an exec, we did kind of in the first couple of days, brought in all the first years, showed them a couple game, like had a couple,
Yeah.
alum come in, show them what a game looks like, show them the different styles, because there was there was three different styles of dodgeball that you'd play on just a given week. You'd start out, there was classic, which is just, you throw the balls, last person standing wins. There was doctor, where there'd be a hockey net in the middle of each team's side with a player with a penny in there, and he could go out when you get hit. Instead of going off the court, you'd sit down, put your hands up, and the doctor would run out, grab you, and if he pulled you to the back wall without getting hit, and touched your hands to the back wall, you'd be saved and you come back. So that had a lot more strategy, because now you're trying to keep as many balls as you can to try and hit the doctor when he goes out. Or you can play a different strategy of just overworking the doctor, getting so many hits on people that are sitting down that he has to work so hard pulling back that he tires out, and eventually just win the game that way. There's so many. And then there was double doctor, where there's no net. You have two doctors in the pennies, and they stay on the back wall. And it's same as the other one, where if a player gets hit, they just sit down and get pulled back. And if one of your double doctors gets hit, they'd have to go sit out right in the center field of the court, and the other doctor would have to come and attempt a save on them, right? So it's a very vulnerable position. So there's these three different styles. So you come in fresh, you get these kind of explained to you, watch a little bit, and then you jump right in. And I guess you get maybe a practice or two before you play, or did we just throw people right in to try it out?
So Nick, it was I mean, I don't know how you ran things, but
Yeah.
I did them prior to classes starting. I did tower. I rented the gym for each tower for an hour, went through the
Right.
rules.
Yeah, that's what we did. Yeah.
Problem was, I know there's a couple gangsters like you and me, because I know I didn't go to mine in my first year,
Yeah.
who might be a little more drawn to Dukes than they were
Mhm.
to to some sort of bullshit orientation.
Yeah.
Uh, so I did that, and then the seeding tournament. That's what you do. So basically,
Right. Right.
we would do that. That's one of the cool things I learned from the LDL is when you're doing jersey orders that size, you got to order from a rubric. Like you have to, we ordered the sizes a month before they even showed up, or months before they even showed up, because
Right.
if there's 50 people on a team, 90% of the time, 32 of them will be mediums, right? So the
Right.
distribution,
Mhm.
and I started ordering stuff like that to accommodate. But anyways, sorry, the
Right.
whole point was
Yeah.
you get a double elimination seeding tournament, and that was your exposure to it. And then
Right.
after the seeding tournament was done, so you would have 2 games under your belt. You in the seeding tournament, you had to play all three styles, and I don't think we made them play assassins. We usually introduced
Right.
assassins
Right. Right.
6 of 18, right?
Uh-huh. Right. So yeah, and Assassins is the fourth game type that you could choose. You couldn't choose it until week 6. That was our rule. We didn't introduce that game style. So Assassins was pretty much classic, like I explained. There's maybe a 3-foot area on the back wall behind the baseline of the basketball court between the wall, and you would have one person with a penny that'd be your assassin. There'd be a couple different colored balls that only the assassins could throw. So you're trying to get those in there. So you have to play from both ways. You're watching the whole team that's in front of you that's throwing balls at you. And you also have
Yeah.
to be aware of when the assassin has the ball. So that was a whole new dimension that kind of got thrown into people that we'd throw in week 6, where everybody would, that would be the game of the week where you played the middle game would be. Right. So then I guess to explain that to people too. So then there'd also be, so once you do the seeding tournament, right, you get paired if you have enough players on your floor of the residence that could make up enough teams. And it also had to have a pretty distinct split between how many males and females to play those different roles, like we said. And if you didn't, you would get paired with another floor, right? So you could be in the Henday Tower, you could be 7-8 Henday, like I was in my second year, right? Where we'd pair these two floors together. Once you have that, you play with your seeding tournament and then you go right in. It was probably a 16-week season complete with
Hmm.
playoffs. So you'd go in, you'd be a best of 5, you'd have your schedule, you'd play at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday against for Kelsey. You'd say
Yeah.
you'd go out, you have your team captains, everybody warms up, you do O Canada before. Team captains go up to the front, they'd rock paper scissors with the head referee. So that was another piece of this, is we also had to hire a team of 15 head referees that you would train and have run all these games for you as your kind of boots on the ground operatives there. And then each team that played the following game, say you played at 7, or yeah, if you played at 8, you would have to send 4 people from your team. Both teams would have to send 4 people down as side refs that Bill had mentioned earlier. And so we'd have all of that set out. The 2 team captains would pick either games 1 and 4 or 2 and 5, and the middle game of the week of the best of 5 was just game of the week. It would rotate. One week it'd be assassins, like we said, one week it'd be doctor, one week it'd be classic. So and you can see who you're playing as you go, and every year's different because of the turnover of the year, all the new kids coming in, and all the movement of the floors, right? You might be returning from the year before, but you might be on a new floor, right? So if you have a really skilled person, so there's inklings for the first few weeks. There's inklings of which teams you think will be good. Then you do the seeding tournament, and then you get to watch it develop. It's like if you took took the NHL and mixed up all
Yeah.
the players every year. So you don't know who's going to be good until about week 4 or 5 of the season. And then there's still, week 12, there could be a team that didn't really figure it out or had a bunch of first years, and they start to put it together. So the whole season, you get to see it develop as they go and get better leading up to a playoff, which is just an incredible thing to see, because usually sports are
Yeah.
have a lot of parity, but who's going to win, right? If whoever won the Stanley
Hmm.
Cup the year before, you know to look out for them the next year. But you never really had that with dodgeball. It was a clean slate every year, which made it just as exciting, right? And you have a whole different aspect, and there's different team dynamics. You don't have the Detroit Pistons of the 80s or wherever it was, where they had that
Yeah.
identity and they would roll it over year to year. You'd have these new teams that pop up with their own new identities, right? You'd have the fun teams that weren't very good and they'd be really fun to go watch because they'd kind of mess around. And then you had the diehards that would take it and they'd book 2 practices a week on top of the regular play, and they'd be them. So you would get to watch as the season progresses, you could see which teams were getting better and which ones would start to attract followings. So then these floors, say you were on 10 Mackenzie and you had a really good dodgeball team, you start this aura of everyone starts to talk about it because it is such a big part of the culture in there. And with all these people you're living in, you start to hear about, those have you seen 10 Mac play? Oh, they're pretty good, right? And then you start to see their games the crowd start to get a little bit bigger. And then by the end of the season, everybody in Lister knows every team. They know every key player on every team. They know the matchups. They know the big games of the week. There's forums that go on with everybody discussing the skill levels of everybody. And it's just this amazing progression into a sports dynamic that you'd never see anywhere else.
No.
It's so uncomparable to anything else, and that's what it makes it such a hard thing to explain to people. But it's got its own dynamic, and then on top of that, there's also All Stars, which is
There's nothing.
probably, yeah, there's nothing like it. I'm going to try and explain it as best I can. So there was 4 towers in the residence, right? There was Kelsey, Mackenzie, Henday, and Schaefer. So
And
just after,
now there's
yeah,
shallow folk too. Yeah.
yeah, and Shalafu now is a new tower. But when we were running the league, these were the towers that happened. So then another aspect of this is now you have these young kids come in, and everybody knows that there's this all-star tournament in February, I think, right after reading week,
I
usually.
think when's spring break, Nick?
I'm
March?
not sure. Yeah, maybe
I,
March.
I know practice week is the week before spring break, which is starts in February.
Right.
Spring break, come back, all stars.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have that. So now you have all this other dynamic is now everybody wants to make this all-star team, but you have to pick of that tower. You have to have one person from each team or
Yeah.
from each floor, one person from each floor.
Unless you change that, that was an unwritten rule.
Yeah, that was, I can't remember what we did with that. Anywho, we, so we'd have these meetings where each captain of the team, so you'd have say 10 captains from the floor, right? 1 to 10 Kelsey would come in for the Kelsey meeting. It'd be a 4-hour meeting with Robert's rule of order, if anybody looks up what that is. So you have to put
Don't.
your yeah, it's just a way of keeping a meeting rolling. But we would have 4 hours of just discussion and fighting and decision
Oh
making
man.
on who would make these teams, and it was devastating to people, right? People put so much into this that if you made that team, it made your whole year. If you didn't, it could crush your whole year.
Yeah.
It was quite the instance. So then there's also these forums that are going. So now there's all this politics going on throughout the entire year of there's all-star forums of who's these young up and comers, people putting out their predictive lists of who they think is going to make the team.
Power
There's all
ranking.
these things. Yeah, there's power rankings of who they think is strong. It's just this amazing.
They're still doing that. I heard too. My brother told me that they're still putting up, like, in the Lister newspaper, dodgeball power rankings and
Oh,
dodgeball
I'm
power.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then one of the most amazing aspects I found of being an executive, and I think you had told me right off the hop of this was one of the funnest parts of it, was the LDL execs would be part of each one of those meetings, right? We'd be in the Kelsey meeting, we'd be in the Henday meeting. We're the only ones that knew every team's list. And then we'd go out at once, pretty much it was the day you finished your last meeting, you go back to the office, you start assembling all these offer letters to be on the all-star team. Every exec signs them, and once you have them all built, you get to go around like Christmas. So usually you finish that about midnight, maybe midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, depending on how much jump you had on it, because it's a bunch of ones to get filled out and make sure you have everything right, all your T's crossed and I's dotted. But then we got to go out and everybody knew when they were coming. We'd kind of give a little heads up of when they might be coming. And we got to walk around at 2-3 in the morning to all these different floors and everybody waiting up. And we wouldn't ever hand it right to people. We'd just be sliding it under doors. So everyone would wait around to see who from their floor made it. And you get to see these celebratory. And also part of it was, the flip side of that coin. You got to see the disappointment. Sometimes that was quite rough to watch people that really thought they were going to make it, or maybe it was an attitude thing. And that was the other part of it, because it was a university sport. There was 4 pillars of the LDL. Now, am I going to remember them all? Right. And the first one was sportsmanship, teamwork.
Yeah.
Skill is number 4, and love of the game is 3. Right. That's what I messed up in that interview. That was my big part of these 4 pillars that make up the LDL. I couldn't remember skill just because I blanked. It's the easiest one.
I remember that because I remember saying, "Well, you forgot the least important one." So
Exactly. And that's what I thought, but they didn't think that well. But anyway, so there's also these dynamics of people that are quite skilled enough to make it. But if you're not a team player, if you don't have the love of the game, if you don't have the sportsmanship to make it, that was also a huge factor, right? They always call that the number 1 pillar was sportsmanship.
How cool is that, Nick? Like, I mean, I've been in rec sports. We've both done campus rec hockey and all that, right? I mean, we're good Canadians. Like, that's what you got it. It's a rite of passage. But I have never, I mean, I coached U10, U12 soccer when my brother was little. I've never seen a sporting community with that much detailed sportsmanship, with that much emphasis. I mean, we absolutely catapulted skill. It was on a pedestal, and it was important, and people cherished it. But, and as much as we talked about it, and as much as everybody was concerned about who was going to be on the all-star team, who was skill, had the talent, it didn't matter. If you were a poor sportsmanship, it was everybody in the league knew.
And now
people rap about them, and obviously they're not going to make the all-stars. They got a shit attitude. Like, how
exactly.
Cool that was something that whatever, in 2003 they built that culture, and we were part of maintaining it. I love that.
Yeah. And then the other part of that too is now, because it was our number 1 pillar was sportsmanship, and everybody knew that, it was self-policing too. If you see somebody, if ever you got hit and you slammed your ball on the ground, the entire gym looked at you like, what are you doing? Right. It was always when you got hit, you were respectful, you got off the court, you didn't rage. That was a huge piece of the game. Right. And like you say, it was instilled in 2003. They were thinking that far ahead, and we got to regain that. But it was amazing to watch a sport, and that's the only way you can do it, right? To keep a sport that people get that passionate about and that excited over. And it definitely boiled over at points, and there was definitely things that we couldn't control, and just certain dynamic. What's that?
You were 19. Like, what do you?
Yeah.
I mean, we were learning.
Yeah, it's your first time away from home and you're just learning that stuff, but it was so amazing to watch that and have that be part of it because it made it so much nicer too. And now when you're asking because that sportsmanship is such a big dynamic of it, a
Yeah,
sport like dodgeball where a lot of it is on, it's a matter of millimeters of did you get hit or not, right? It clips your shirt
yeah,
and someone's arguing. If
that's right.
anybody ever, if ever anybody talked back to a ref, everybody in that gym would be on them right away. It was such a, it was a code, right? Nobody argues with the referees. Nobody throws a fit if they get hit. You, even if you are angry, you pull it inside, right? And that was such a part of the game that it made it so much nicer. And now
Yeah.
I think that's what opens the doors to these people that never really gave sports a try and
Mm.
needed a couple weeks that, if somebody goes out, and it's their first kind of foray back into sports since maybe they're 12 years old,
Yeah.
they're a little nervous about it. They go out, they throw, and or someone thinks it hit their shirt, they didn't feel it, right? Which happens. It's a game. It's fast paced. Sometimes you get hit and you don't know, and the someone on the other side is freaking out, screaming at you, "I hit you, motherfucker!" They're never going to come back again. But because
No.
there was that thing where we would shut that down right away, we'd go talk to them, we'd make them go over and apologize if ever they did that. Right? There was such a code of that. It gave that freedom for these people that never would have gave dodgeball 6 weeks of their time to develop and get to a certain point where they are somewhat skilled at it and they are starting to enjoy it. They're getting the camaraderie of it. They get to feel the highs and lows of winning. And I think if you don't play sports, you're missing the highs and lows of sports, of winning and losing. And that it's such a rite of passage that so many people don't get because of that. And
Mhm.
it's such a sad thing to see. But for now, you look at what an amazing place Lister is. If anybody's listened to this before, me and Courtney went definitely in depth just because of how much Lister changed us and
Yeah.
allowed us, coming from a small town like Slave Lake to a place like Lister where it's so inclusive. You can be whoever you want, just that. But I think another huge piece that people don't listen to or don't uh, intellectualize is what dodgeball brings, that ups and downs, that shared, it's a shared experience that everybody gets at that point. Yeah, it's empowering and it brings that together. And it's just such an amazing thing that is what I think is so funny about it, and also the fact that it has men and women, males, females, everybody has a role, right? And it's not like an invented role where you're trying to get everybody involved, where you're trying to make a position for someone.
Mhm.
They're all very necessary. I think you'd be hard pressed to make a really good argument with what's more important position, throwing or shagging and dodgeball, right? If you really understand the game. Um, and I think you don't see that in any other sport where males and females can play alongside each other and
And
have
be
the game
equally
flow.
competitive. Be
What's
equal,
that?
contribute, to be
Yeah.
equally as competitive,
Hmm.
contribute equally as much, all the while still having positions that they're uniquely talented at. Now, I
Hmm.
mean, Tim Shan's one of the greatest shaggers
Oh,
in
for sure.
it.
Kevin Lai, amazing male shake. There was male shake, and there's amazing women throwers. Amy
Exactly.
McDonald had a cannon, right? Amanda
Yeah,
Dow. There were so many, and that was the nice thing. It was just a matter of it was, you have to have this many people to start the game. Once the game
yeah,
starts, you can be wherever, you can do whatever you want. There's not a set position, right? And that was the biggest point to show that shaggers are just as important as throwers, because now they knock out all your shaggers. If you have a guy that can shake, they're stepping up in that line. They're going to be the shagger, because if not, you're just going to sit on the back wall. If they hit you, yeah, they get that ball. But if they hit the wall and comes back to them, they can sit there all day until they hit you, right? And you're just sitting there dodging. So it just shows that they're both important
oh
positions.
yeah, and the good teams. I mean, you were an All Stars manager twice. Yeah,
Twice, three times.
three times.
First,
Okay,
first
so
year, second year. Yeah,
I
yeah. I was manager first year, played second year, manager third and fourth year. So I was three times manager, one time player.
always a head manager, or were you assistant manager ever?
No, I was head member because that was my claim to fame that I think got me
Right,
on you and Brendan's radar. I was the only ever first year
right.
manager of an all star team,
Right.
right?
Yeah, you were the only one. That's right.
Hmm.
That's right, because that was the Mohawk. Oh,
Hmm. Oh yeah, I forgot a whole part of the story. We'll have to go back. We'll go back to that after, once we've kind of gone through.
the, I don't mean to sound arrogant, Nick, but like how that little chapter of you and I literally walking into the vice dean's office and having an hour-long conversation. Sorry, we'll talk about that, but we
Yeah,
say
here.
nobody talks about
Well,
it.
let's go right back to that. So this
Yeah,
is my first year. It was a really big deal for me at the time that I was the first year. So there was also, when you pick these all stars, you also pick a manager who's
yeah.
the coach. They'd come up with the strategies. They'd run the
Can I tell
practices. They'd
you,
make them. What's that?
just to comment on the management position,
Hmm.
it developed kind of interestingly enough for anybody who's listening, where the manager used to be, I forget what the number is. Let's say there's 27 people on a team.
Right.
The manager used to be the 28th. You used to have two reserve bubble people in case somebody got injured or didn't want it, and usually your third bubble was your manager or your first
Right.
bubble, depending on how the team wanted to stack. Because the towers were the ones who ultimately voted and built their own team, not the
Right.
execs. Um, so he used to be the bubble boy, but by about I'm going to say just before I showed up, because Brennan Murphy, who was my predecessor, was the one who
Mm-hmm.
told me he really, like in his 3 years in Lister, saw the shift
Mm-hmm.
from the bubble boy to being, we sought out managers. In fact, the manager used to be the last guy picked on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end of my tenure, the manager was the first guy picked. He went from glorified cheerleader to the linchpin of the team, and that was
Exactly.
kind of the role he filled. So sorry,
Yeah.
continue with the.
And well, that rolls right into what I was. So when they picked me, they didn't pick me as they picked me more as a mascot because they didn't think they had a really solid choice for it. I think, and they just wanted someone that they thought. I think they wanted Southwick, who ended up being the captain. He was just going to kind of, run everything. Ooh, I had a little feedback on the old mic there, but anywho, he so we get in there and I kind of just took it upon myself to say like, oh, I know that's what you think this is going to be, but no, I'm going to run this show. I'm going to show everybody. And everyone bought in right away. And they kind of saw, oh no, he's not messing around. He's taking this seriously. He actually knows what he's talking about. And I had to walk into that. But then a big piece of this was a tradition with Kelsey Tower. And that was the tower I was in. That was who I was going to be managing, was all the guys on the team would get a mohawk haircut and dye it red. And sometimes the girls would put a red streak of washout dye in their hair. It was just kind of a camaraderie thing that went back a couple years. I don't know how many years they were doing it for, but it was something that was tradition. Everyone was super excited, right? If you were in Kelsey,
people always elected not to do it voluntarily.
yeah, of course. If you didn't want to do it, you didn't have to. But it was just something that if you really wanted to, and there were so many people that were so excited for it, right? Myself, I was so excited for it because I had heard about it.
Fans, we should note that too. Fans used to always do it. People would come watch the game, turn on the team. Half the tower would have red mohawks.
Right. And when you show up to these games, yeah, if every tower had a color, so people would come full body paint, signs. Like the All-Star games were nuts. There was about, I'm sure the fire code was blown to bits for that. There's just jamming in the 6 feet of space on the side of the gym where you can fit people. It was like people stacked on top of each other. Like you can find pictures on the Lister website. Maybe at one point, if I make an Instagram for this podcast or something, I'll put a picture up of what it looks like in there. But it's just this amazing event that everybody gets excited for. But like you say, yeah, even the crowd are getting mohawks. So this is something that these first years have been told since the first or second day they walked in, when they first heard about All Stars, and they go back, they watch videos because the first couple of weeks everyone's trying to show their first years what dodgeball is before you do that seeding tournament stuff. And a lot of the times you go back to the past All Star tournaments because it really just shows really high level dodgeball and what it looks like. So you get to see, if you're in Kelsey, when I walked into Kelsey, I don't think maybe I'd heard about the Mohawks or seen it from my sister at one point, but I remember being so excited if I could make that team. I didn't think I was going to make the team at that point because I wasn't that good, but the manager thing was still, something that I had in mind. But at that point, there was never a first year manager, so I didn't think I'd get it at that point. But anyways, we walk in and we get all excited for our Mohawks, and then the university decides to step in and say, no, we believe that this Mohawk thing is hazing, and we're not going to allow it this year. And we thought, well, they don't understand what it is. We'll talk to him. So I booked a meeting with I think the head of our tower at that point, like what I don't remember the name of the position, and she said no, and I made some really well thought out arguments, right? Not everybody has to do it. It's not, if it was hazing, we'd be forcing people. Nobody's forcing. We'll sign sign off sheets saying that we're doing this under our own will. All these things. No. So I thought, oh well, it must just be a decision that she can't make. I'll go to the head of Lister. So I go to the head of the residence and I sit down with them. Same thing. No, that's the rule. This is our new hazing policy. And this was about the time where hazing in universities was a big buzzword, and there was a lot of really bad actual hazing that went on, and people were just trying to crack down on it too far. So I at then that point was, really disappointed, really disheartened with what I thought. When you come to university, you think this is free thinking. If you can make a good argument, people will listen. They're not just going to tell you no for the sake of saying no if it's unreasonable. That was kind of what I wanted. It was very disillusioning at that point. And I think at that point I went to you because for some reason, I think were you the only exec at that point? Because maybe one of the other execs had made the All-Star team and had to step down for that week.
That was the first year that happened, where all the execs, or not all, but yeah, where I was running the league because everybody else made a team. Or they brought it back that year, remember? That was
Yeah.
so I got that.
Yeah.
That was the start of that trend where when execs would make all star teams, they would bring back a
Alumni exec.
and bring him in with X amount of
Yeah.
dollars in the league for 3 weeks,
Yeah,
which was
we got to see the budget after you came in to run the All-Star tournament my year when I
oh,
played.
that kid told me, I can show you the emails among emails where I ask for budget, where I tell him I'm going to spend things, and like the
Yeah.
shit he got mad about, I emailed him about,
I,
and
I re- I just remember walking up to the gym, play it right. I was playing at that point. This was my second year, so I was on hand day, and I walk up. I just see this velvet carpet and velvet ropes leading up to the gym. I'm like, who is checking the budget here? Like, I know I'm not because I'm playing. But oh, this is so funny. Anyway,
that,
so at that point, and I didn't really know you at that point, Bill. I think that was when we
yeah,
first kind of met each
we
other,
were
and you were just
we had started drinking together at that point.
yeah, yeah, at Duke's maybe.
Because the All Star meetings happen like 6 weeks prior. So we knew each other, but once you made the All Stars team, that's when you and I started. I mean, like it puts us in the same world real quick, right?
Right,
All of a
exactly. And I
sudden,
think that's when that's
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 when
when
we
the talks of me starting to be an exec started to start. I think
yeah,
that's when you and Brendan started putting that
I
pressure.
was
Hey,
doing
maybe
that.
if you like this. And so, anyways, where we go. So then I explained the situation to Bill, and
Yeah,
Bill immediately said that is bullshit and jumped.
yeah.
And next thing I knew, Bill had booked a meeting. Yeah, was it the vice dean of the university or
So the first step, yeah, I had heard rumblings of this going on, but
right?
you were my point of contact. So
Hmm.
immediately I left you and I went to. She wasn't the head. I went and talked with your tower,
Right.
whatever their position's called,
Hmm.
but they work at the university. She told me exactly what she told you. I said that's fine, and I said I'm going to go to your boss if that's fine. She encouraged me to, like she did with you, and
Hmm.
I talked with her. I forget her name and title as well, but she
Yeah.
shut me down. I happened to bump into Dima Utgoff, who was the head of resident services, so all the residents at the time.
Hmm.
I chatted with him, and he gave me a hard no. So for the to their chagrin and to the benefit of the league, neither of them knew that I had spent the last year working for the vice dean and provost, and for the dean of students, vice provost of the university, and I forget what other title he had. Anyways,
Right.
badass named Dr. Frank Robinson. So
Yeah.
I managed to get a meeting on the books with him. And Nick, I remember we went over there, explained to him, and Dr. Frank, he's just a boss, right?
Yeah. He was
And
awesome to work with. He understood. He was
yeah,
reasonable.
the reason his name is a little bit tarnished in our community is because he's the guy who was the face of the LHSA sanctions that ultimately led to the fall.
Right.
And
Right.
this was right around the time the university was investigating that. So
Oh, I remember that.
that's why this was lumped into a ball. It wasn't quite public yet at this point. Well, it was.
Mhm.
Sorry, the LHSA knew that
Under
they were probably
investigation and all that.
going to have to shut down. So, anyways, we went to him. We had a great meeting for like an hour. Just talked about we had anything and everything dodgeball. He was so behind it.
Yeah.
And then the power move of my 19, 18, 20-year-old selves was he called the lady who had told both of us no,
Yeah.
asked her if she could come over and meet with us.
Oh
She
yeah.
She said she would be able to come over in a little bit. He said, no, I'd like you to come over. So not in the same building. So she
Yeah.
walked from the office at the residence 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away to his
Yeah.
office, 6th floor of the student union building, came and sat with us. And she sat down and he told her they're allowed to have mohawks.
Yeah. And he even explained like what we had already explained to her about how not everybody's doing it. We have a player on the team that's not going to do it, right? He
Yeah,
plays football, he likes his hair, it's all
yeah,
good. And he just kind of showed her down like, I know where you're coming from trying to say it's hazing, but you're way
yeah,
overreaching here. This is
yeah,
ridiculous. These guys are fine. And it was to go from hearing no 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 and just being shut down for no good reason and all that and just being so disillusioned to walking in to that meeting of being totally, I was
yeah.
only in university itself, only moved out of my parents' house for what 5 6 months at that time. I was still pretty fresh out in the world. Like, this is a big meeting for me, and to walk in and just see how that happened. Oh, and then you get to and then I got the pleasure of walking back to the team. I didn't tell them what the result was.
Yeah.
I just say, oh, team meeting on 3K or whatever. I got to, and I think I pulled one of the, I really tried. We met with this guy, I met with this guy, and we even went over to the dean of students, and and he said we could fucking do it, and just the entire room blew up. But it was just such a fun intro to just society and not giving
Yeah,
up and seeing where you can make your moves is just such a huge piece
right.
of it. And I think that was a huge piece. And going through that was probably what started to think of just not giving up and taking it to the next level is probably what
That's
you
right.
and Brendan, I would imagine what you and Brendan saw and what after that was you guys, because I wanted to be an FC, which is under that LHSA, which is what we talked about. It's kind of a floor coordinator.
Mhm.
You would be able to come back to Lister and you kind of run little events on the floor, and that's what I wanted to come back because that was more of a traditional second year thing to do, right? It's pretty low level position, but you still get to come back. You still get to make a difference. And I was like, oh, I'll do that next year. And then my third year, I'll go to be an exec. And you guys pretty much told me and said, no, you're going to do that this year. You're going to sign up. Yeah, this is what you're going to do. I think I left Dukes with a whole
Well,
pack of
it was
swag of LDL stuff.
you know what it was for you, Nick? I remember you saying, because FCs and RAs get guaranteed spots in Lister.
Right.
And I remember saying to you, "All fucking like, if you apply, we'll get that
Right.
taken care of."
I forgot all about that. That was the big thing. Yeah, because I wanted to be an exec, but it was at that point it was moving towards more being external, and they were really cracking down on the amount of returning students
Yeah.
that year. So it used to be if you wanted to come back, you pretty much could, right? They would allow people, and that's what me and Courtney talked about on the first podcast of what we really think is so disappointing is we got to both see my sister was very shy when she was younger, right? And she kind of got stuck with that label. And even when she kind of grew out of that shyness in high school, she was already labeled that. So she couldn't really ever get out of under it because everyone just assumed she's the shy girl, right? And she got to go to university, got to see what Lister got to do for her and does for thousands of kids, right? On top of the benefits you get from going to university and getting an education. I think Lister teaches you way more than that, right? And just how to interact with adults, how to handle your own problems. You can't run to your parents every 2 seconds. It
Mhm.
teaches you all that. But I think it's so sad that starting, I mean, they were doing it forever. They were trying to crack down on what you could do in Lister, right? They would say you can only, when I came in my first year, that was the change they made was you can't drink out in the lounge. You can only drink in a room or go off campus, which is
Yeah.
one of the most dangerous decisions, right? They were trying to frame it under health risk, but you got to see the amount of consequences from it when people aren't allowed in their first couple of months being away from their parents. They're forced to just go out to bars downtown Edmonton and try and find their way home in -40. It's just not going to work, right? It's such a dangerous decision they made, and that's what we were all saying. On top of all these other things, is you're in under the guise of public safety, you're creating a huge hazard here, right? And that was the first one that we came into. Then the next year they were saying, oh, we're going to try and make it a predominantly first year residence. So now they're cutting out, not only are they cutting out the available points for people to learn their boundaries drinking, but now they're cutting out the returning people that are the force behind Lister. That's what makes Lister what it is it's
Yeah.
those people that come back, they got to see what the experience did for them, right? Like myself in that first year, I got to see what it did for me. It opened me up, allowed me to be who I was, and I wanted to come back for more, right? But now they're releasing it. So now you can only come back if you were an FC or an RA, right? That was the rules that they changed. That was what I was so worried about. But I think that is probably the worst decision they could ever make. I think that dilutes what makes Lister so powerful of not having those
Well,
students there.
they were
Go ahead.
trying to kill the culture, Nick, 100%. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I suppose the long, the behind the scenes conversation that ties everything you've just said together is what happened after you left that meeting with Dr. Frank. And you know, life was good, all stars went on, but that's when I went to the ground, and I believe you were involved because later on in the process when you got hired, we kind of circled you back in, but
Right. Oh yeah, I
that's
remember
what I
that.
started dealing with Res Services and with the Dean of Students office and with the Provost office, and basically securing the guarantee for the LDL to continue to exist outside of the LHSA purview
Mhm.
for the LHSA to fold. And then you kind of talked about the LHSA positions, and because they were embroiled in, I mean, there's some 80 plus LHSA employees at any given time,
Mhm.
and 18 to 15 LDL employees. So the 80 plus LHSA had decades of documented hazing allegations against them
Mhm.
that were. Sorry, Nick, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
What
So that was exactly the thing, right? And they were trying to
you were saying something, and when I cut you off, and I
yeah,
had a point.
but going right on to that is too, that was another thing that we had to secure. I don't know if it was this year or the following year when they cracked down even further, but now the entire dodgeball league was at risk because we can run it each year, but if there's not a returning player that is involved in dodgeball on that,
Yes,
right? It
yeah,
used to be where there were so many people returning, and it was such a big part that the odds of you having no returning people that are passionate about
yeah,
dodgeball on the floor was almost non-existent. But now you're cutting it down to only certain positions come back. So then we had to fight to make
That's
a
right. Well,
dodgeball captain or a dodgeball liaison, an actual registered position on the floor that would give you a guaranteed spot back in
because
Lister, so that we
that's
could keep.
fundamental to Lister culture. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because it's fundamental, right? And that's what, and that was the big fight that we had to get.
so that was the point I was going to make, was that I remember in those discussions, Dr. Frank just saying like res services is trying to get rid of the second year culture. There's no
Mm-hmm.
they think they can stop this pass down, this complete flip flop of cultures that happens every year where it just recycles itself.
Mm-hmm.
We can Lister for the better. And I don't know if this is the time or the place to really get into the nitty gritty of whether that was the right move or wrong move. It was the wrong move,
It was the
but
wrong move.
as far as just actual dodgeball and as far as like the communities involved is concerned,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was egregious. And you're right. I remember that happening when they started saying, okay, well, we'll have like 3 second-year dodgeball liaisons and captains that can return,
Right.
right?
Which
Yeah.
was huge at that point. And then they cut it down even from there. And I don't even want to ask what it is now. I don't even know how many are returning, because I know they were really trying to also, I think they could make more money on international students. So they were trying to make it very, you can charge almost double, not only on tuition, but for housing too. You can charge so much more for it, which is a crime in itself, right? But that puts a
Well,
perverse incentive into it.
I mean, Nick, you're right. You very well might be right. The international, I don't know how it's structured. International students tend to pay more, but that's only
Mhm.
because they're offsetting the amount that you and I as Canadians, the government's kicking in for us. So it's not that
Right.
tuition in Canada's
Mhm.
5,000 a semester, it's 15. The government just pays that extra 10, right?
Oh, I got you. I got you. So maybe I thought that was always, but I was just trying to think of other reasons, because it seems like universities as a whole, and this is maybe a whole different subject, is just they're so concentrated on money. And that's why you see these admin
Mm-hmm.
costs and stuff of these universities are just ballooning, and the cost of universities ballooning. But really, the changes to what is happening for what you're getting, your bang for your buck of your actual schooling, hasn't changed at all. Right. And I think that is what there's some perverse incentives in there somewhere, where the goal of a university isn't now create what it should be is you create the
Yeah,
best people going forward, right? You want them
yeah.
to be educated, you want them to be polite, you want to be them a fully functioning member of society, right? Whereas
Mhm.
Lister actually does that. And education, if you don't come in, you just drive in from your parents' house, you don't do that, and you go get your degree, you learn a very specific set of knowledge, right? That is your
Yeah,
degree. Whereas when somebody comes in into Lister, you also get that degree and your specific knowledge in that, but you're learning how to be on your own, how to do your own laundry, how to interact with people, all those things we said, learning your limits of where you can press things, right? When you have the backup of your parents at home, you gives you the freedom to do a lot of things. You don't really learn your limits. You always have someone to turn to. When you have to learn, the rights and wrongs, you overindulge one night and you have to feel the hangover the next day and go to class, and all those lessons you learn. It just, it's so sad to me that they're trying to crush, for whatever reason. Maybe I'm off on my reasoning of why, but I would almost bet my life savings that money's always the root cause of it. There's some
well,
way
there's
where,
that, right?
and it could be something so simple as what's the word, liability.
Yeah,
Because it seemed like at the start that's what they're really trying to change with all the changes to second years coming back. They wanted to change it from a drinking culture, a fun culture of a family, everyone doing everything together, to just, it's just where you live, you go to school. Like, they don't want people socializing, because now there's less risk, now there's less activities that
yeah,
people could get in trouble. And it just seems like they're so focused on liability, which I agree with to a point. But if you're not fully understanding all that liability gets you, right? The liability that you're coming on, which I fully
yeah,
understand, if you're having kids drink on a floor, a bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids drinking on
yeah,
a floor, there's some liability issues there. But you have to weigh the positives that you get out of this unmatched space that is nowhere else in the world. Where do you have a place like
yeah,
Lister where people can go in and have that? It's unmatched anywhere. It's this uh very amazing thing. It's almost a piece of art that they have there that is sustained through the years, and they go to tear that down, and it just hurts me so much, because there's no other alternative. Where can you put someone that can have that kind of life-changing growth in 4 years? If you went back all 4 years, you could grow more in those 4 years than some people will over 20 years. Someone that if you especially if you come from a small town like I did, I just think of myself, if I would have not
totally.
gone to Lister, if I would have just got an apartment and I didn't go out and socialize, I would have been, stuck in my ways of what I knew and the people I knew. I'd go to
Yeah,
class and back, and I'd go back to my apartment for 4 years. I'd learn nothing. I'd be coming out. I don't even want to think about who I would be and what I'd be, because of how much I grew. It seemed like every semester of Lister, I grew 3 years of
Yeah.
maturity at that point. And I just think that's so sad that that's going away. And maybe not altogether. And I think I would have to do a more in-depth dive into what it looks like these days. But it just seemed like the path it was
Mhm.
on was just getting worse and worse every year. They were restricting and cracking down and trying to change it every year
Yeah.
to make it so it's this zero liability, plain Jane, all these beautiful murals that went back. So then there was also these tower competitions that everyone would do, right? It was something that the LHSA, like we talked about, that was under investigation at the time. I think they're back now. They were shut down for a couple years in my fourth year. Um, but they'd have these tower competitions where nothing to do with dodgeball. This was way before dodgeball. This went back to like the 60s, I believe, where within your tower, you compete as a floor, you compete against and, scavenger hunt challenges, recording your own music videos. There's always, all these different challenges, and they have points. And if you won it, you get to paint a mural in the tower or in the tunnel leading over to your tower. And there
Well,
was these.
you should get rid of the guys and call her straight here. I mean, she was a week long hardcore drinking competition for the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Okay,
It's
fair
turned
enough. Yeah,
into into a challenge that were involved with these drinking games somewhere
right,
between
right.
the 2000s, and then in the late 2010s, mid 2010s is where they were
Mhm.
like, all right.
Yeah. So just where I was going with that, and you hit it right on the head there. Yeah. No, it was a party session and had a lot, but it was still history, right? And there was these
Yeah,
beautiful murals, and well, some were beautiful, some were ugly as all hell, but they all had the
but it
year
was
and the
part of it.
floor. It was part of
Yeah,
it. It was part of the culture. It was these. Every time you'd walk, that was the first thing. All these people that would come for a visit of Lister and see what it is. When you're walking over to check out each tower, you have to walk through each tower's mural hall. It's just a
yeah,
tunnel that goes underground to your tower, and you've got to walk, I don't know, 100 yards with both sides of you, this art going all the way. And in my second or third year, they decided, like you said, they wanted to cancel that culture, so they painted over them all. And it was, for the people that got to see it, it was such a blow. Just
yeah.
disheartening what the message you're sending to these kids that you're trying to show of be your own person and stand up for what's right, and just to watch them come in, bulldoze, don't take a vote, don't ask anybody's opinion on it. And there was outrage from all the people and from alumni that were coming back. They were saying, this is not right, you shouldn't do this, but they don't care, they're just doing it. And I just think that's such a, not only is it a sad thing to me to watch the amazing place that Lister was be
Mhm.
co-opted into what they want it to be, but then to also watch the history that was there to that point just scrubbed away, and you had no say in it, right? It was that first experience with authority of, they don't care, they didn't check with anybody, they have a program they want to impose on people, and that's what they're going to do, no ifs ands or buts about it. And I just think that as a whole of universities, they don't understand what they're doing with some of these things they're trying to do with maybe with the best hopes in mind, good intentions, but
Yeah,
the actual consequences, if they would sit down and do a full scope of what they're doing, they would realize that they're actually causing more harm than good. And which would be fine if there was other places, you see people ruin you ruin somebody's hockey league. There's other hockey leagues, you ruin, I'm trying to think of you ruin a book club, you can go join other book clubs. There's nothing that creates a culture like that Lister residence did,
yeah,
and what it gave to people, the freedom it gave to people, right? And people are going to, they try and think that university is still that inclusive place that lets everyone be who they are. But really,
yeah,
if you're just going to class and back, you're not really in depth. You have to really try to force yourself into these other, off campus events and stuff. But when you're in Lister, it's not really an option. If you want to not participate, you can, but there's going to be people every step of the way trying to get you to come out. They want you to be a family. They want everyone to come out. Every year
mhm,
you'd have a couple first years on your floor that would take a, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you would, everybody on the floor, hey, come out with us, come out with us. And eventually you bring them. By the end of the year, they were part of your college, and you got to watch them, come out of their cocoon into this beautiful butterfly
mhm,
that you'd never see. But it's because people grabbed at them and pulled at them and tried to involve them every step of the way. But that's what those second years and third years on those floors are coming back to do, to create that culture, to make it a family. Now you just throw a bunch of first years in there, they're just going to click up like everybody does, right? If there's no one there to prevent it, it's just going to, if
yeah.
I
The
come
second,
there and I like sports, I'm going to find the other two guys on the floor that like sports, and that's who's going to be, right. And it might curtail from there into a little more bleed, just because you are so close, and just uh, proximity creates that
yeah,
closeness. But I think there's going to be those certain edge cases of people that need a little kick in the ass to get out and try, because maybe they have a little bit of social anxiety and they need someone to really show them that they are. But when you can pull them out of their shell, give them a good experience. Maybe if it's even just walking across the street to Duke's, which we've already mentioned, which was the bar directly across from the residence that we knew the owners of, and they were great people. Spent a lot of cash in there. But even if it's something like that, where it's not big on them, it's not a big social outing where they had to take them to downtown to a big dance club in Edmonton. Just getting them out the door. Maybe they only have 2 drinks, maybe they don't drink at all, but they just come out for the camaraderie, and you can watch what it does to these people. And I could sit here and tell stories, and this is kind of what I came up with Courtney on the first podcast we did. I was saying I want to do a podcast that just kind of doesn't have a set
Yeah.
topic or anything, but we're saying if I did want to do a topic, I think a great one would just be taking ex-lister people and just saying, what did it do for you? What kind of change? Who were you before, and what did it do? I think you could have a whole podcast just on that. I think that's how powerful that place is, and
It's a
or maybe
huge
was.
and people who live there absolutely love it. I mean, you're not wrong. It's lacking that allegiance or that commitment that like a fraternity or sorority, something in the Greek community would. But it's really, I don't want to say it's the closest thing we have to it, because I'm a fraternity member at a U of A fraternity. But you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, it really is. It cultivates that culture on an exponential level.
Mhm.
And you're right. It is sad to see that we're losing a handful of it, and that censorship of art. I mean, that's straight out of George Orwell's books. I mean, that's
Mhm.
just fucking strange, if I'm being honest. But
Yeah.
it seems to be the prerogative of universities to find ways to create problems they haven't found, or to solve
Mhm.
problems they haven't found yet. Now, in the LHSA situation, I mean, there was hazing allegations there, but from what I saw, and I was actually named in the investigation, I found out, which I don't know. I never got called to be a witness or anything, and I mean it's over now. But yeah, Brendan Murphy randomly was like, "I just want to let you know,
Yeah.
your names are on some documents," and I was told it's nothing, but like we are technically LHSA employees at one point, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But you're probably in there too, Nick. To be
Oh,
honest,
I'm
so
sure. I'm sure I very well was, because I was an FC at one point too, my first year before
exactly,
I did that. Right, just to step in for the
exactly.
second half of the year. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's how should I put this? Have you ever worked for ExxonMobil or with Exxon?
from time to time.
Well, you and I both make our bread from the oil industry, so I'm not going to run anyone down, and I'm definitely not running down the OG ExxonMobil. But
Mhm.
there's a saying when I worked construction on one of their sites, and it was so safe you just might get hurt, and that's kind of like it's so safe you just might do something fucking to ruin your life, right?
Exactly, exactly, and that's my big worry too. Is now the more you take away from the family, the biggest thing that probably brings is just for mental health.
Yeah,
Part from everything is now we talk about all the positives of stepping away from your family, being on your own, but that's also a very tough time for lots of people too, especially ones that have been a little sheltered too, and have that kind of in between of you left your family being your parents at home, but if you're walking right into a new family, it might
yeah,
not be right away, but you have that little bit. Right now you're having a bit of a tough time, your school isn't quite for you, and you're in a really dark place. You have those people to go
yeah.
to. If you don't come, if you stay in your room locked in there for 2 weeks, and people don't only see you to go out for a bite to eat, someone's going to step in and say, hey, let's check on that person. But now you start to take away all this camaraderie and allowing them to drink together, and having those second years that come back and create that culture of a family. I don't want to be the go right to the darkest point, but I see some bad. I mean, there's already an issue in universities with suicide. You
Yeah.
have people that walk away from their family into a really stressful position. Some people come from around the world. We'd see it 4 or 5 times a year. It felt like at the U of A when I was there. And I
Yeah.
think that is, and it would happen at Lister from time to time, but I think probably historically, if you look back over the years, because of that culture, probably was way less than any other residence that you could compare to that doesn't have
Yeah.
that kind of culture. And I think that is another dangerous piece of the puzzle that they never looked at once and try and change all this culture that they're not seeing. I think that is huge. That everyone looking out for his shoulder, or a matter of you know these people are such a family to you that even though you're having so much fun, this happened to me so many times. I can tell you 10 stories of this. If you've been out of the bar having the time of your life, but you see someone that's on your floor that's part of that isn't doing well and needs to get home, and you say, fuck,
Yeah.
I'm having the funnest time,
Fair.
but he needs me right now, I got to get him home. And I remember that happened all the time, and that's what it created, right? And it made that safe space for people. Even when you were off of your floor with them,
Yeah.
you'd look out for them, right? If anybody ever messed with any girl on your floor at a bar, it was a fight
Oh,
immediate, right? If you ever went out,
in
these
a big
these
way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in a big way. There's these 18-year-old girls that were going out into the bars for the first time. Alberta, the drinking age is 18. They're walking into Roadhouse and all that downtown, and with a lot of good people and not good people altogether. It's an oil field place. It's a lot of oil field money, and you have some,
yeah, good or
28, 20,
good or bad, you toss enough liquor into a situation. I mean,
100.
somebody's gonna act stupid, right? We don't need to
Mhm.
criticize people; it's just reality.
Exactly, but now you give these young ladies and young men too. I mean, young men start to bark off and get themselves into positions probably more so than the girls do. I'm just saying that need to look out because there's some unscrupulous characters out there. But you
Yeah,
have that dynamic of there's. I can tell you another 10 stories if you see a situation going, and then all of a sudden there's 10 people around, and not even just your floor mates, but just listen. You see someone that maybe you've never even met before, but you recognize them because you see them all the time there, and there's just that camaraderie there. That point. If I don't do something here, I need to, right? I might not even know this girl's name, but if I see an uncomfortable situation, I'm definitely going to insert myself, and I think that's going to go away a lot too. And I don't think. I just wish. Even if at every step of the way they would have said we understand all these points and that these are all, but we feel that these changes, the benefits would outweigh those benefits that you're getting already, I'd be fine with that. At least you made a good decision. But I guarantee you they didn't even look at it that way. They're just saying either they can make an extra dollar or they're just trying to lower their liability so that because they don't care if something happens at a bar downtown or a person doesn't make it, it doesn't matter to them really. They made their money, you still paid your dues, nothing happened on their site. They don't care as long as it doesn't happen in their building. And I think that's such a piss poor way to look at it and such a dangerous way for these kids. If I'm a parent and I'm trusting trusting
yeah,
my child, your pride and joy to go off and be safe. I would want them to not be caring about the bottom dollar or a culture or liability. No, whatever's going to make sure that for the 8 months a year that my student is living there, they have the safest, best time of their life. Right? That's all you can ask. That's what they should be going for. That should be what their goal is. But it really seems like they're not either. They don't understand enough their own what they have within their hands. They don't understand what they're dealing with, which
hmm
very well could be, or they just don't care. And either way, either one of those doesn't sit right with me. And that's what gets me pissed off is either they know it and they acted anyways, or they don't know it. And either way, that's for something so powerful as Lister or what it
yeah,
was or what we saw of Lister. I think it deserves that more than anything to almost over any other piece of the university, right? Like my business degree, it was all right. I didn't get much out of it. There's a couple
yeah.
classes. The Excel course was nice. There was a couple econ ones, and maybe one. The only time that I was really blown away and had a really teacher that was awesome was one of our professors had to go on to Rachel Notley's committee to come up
hmm
with the carbon tax at that one point because that was happening right when I was in school. So we had a actual a lady, I can't remember where she worked for, but she just came in on for this one semester, this one class a week. She was going to teach it, but she was right out of she worked in the industry and she actually had the knowledge and she was awesome, coming in right from, wouldn't tell us bullshit. The textbook says this, but this isn't how it works. But so much of it was just fluff. And I learned the majority of my real learnings from university
Oh,
outside
yeah.
of the classroom, right? And I just think if they were to understand that, and you can pitch that now, if money's the issue, start spreading the word of what it is. Start to let people know. Every time anybody talks about going to the U of A, I say you have to go to Lister. I don't care what they think. I don't care if you have an apartment already bought. You have to go
Yeah.
to Lister. I tell that to everybody, and I'm an evangelist. Really, I probably piss people off with how serious I am, but it's because I understand that, and I just think that if they would lean into that a little bit of what the great parts of it, they would have that thing full all the time with people that want to come. You could keep that culture
Mhm.
going. You could do it in a safe way. I'm not saying let the inmates run the asylum. I'm not saying that at all. But I think there's a middle ground that could have been from the start if they would have brought a few of these senior voices that were there. There was alumni that care about Lister just as much as I do. That would have came in and gave their 2 cents and be reasonable and say, I think we agree that you're trying to lower less liability, or you want to make a little bit more money. Here's the ways that we see you can bring it in without losing this. But there was just never any voice from those people. It was just all decisions from the top down that got sent down the chain. And I think one of the biggest pieces too is the turnover rate isn't high enough in the senior positions in universities. There's people that are so out of touch with the way the world's changed. If you're 70 some years old and you're sitting in one of the most senior chairs of a university, you don't know what's happening with the world. You don't know what needs to be shaping the minds of these 18, 19-year-olds that are coming into your care. We need to almost have a set, almost either a term limit or a set age where you have to step down or put some new fresh blood in so that you can keep current and you can keep understanding of what the new necessities are. I just think it's such a there's a word for it. It's like not odd. genotocracy or whatever. It's just saying the old people in positions of power that keep these old and it's also this constant growth model that the world has gotten to of now every year you have to make more money, every year you have to get bigger and better, your profits have to rise. A university shouldn't be profit centered, but forcing a university to center around profit now incentivizes them away from what they should be doing. Like we said earlier, if you are a university, you want to actually look at what your goals should be. It's you want to have intelligent, well-spoken, polite, fully functioning members of society that are coming out. That should be your goal, not making money. But because we do this, now you're just trying to insert, you're trying to create more classes, up the charges, create all these admin roles that are unnecessary that can be done. I think this COVID thing is probably the biggest shakeup to that. And people are going to open their eyes to, why am I paying 80 grand a year to come here when I can do this online? You just showed me I can do this online, and now Harvard and MIT are putting out all these full course loads of courses online for free. Like, I just think it's almost like the writing's on the wall. They know that they're on the wrong course, but they just think instead of trying to fix it and try and get with the times, they're just going to ride this bitch till the end, kick and claw, and whatever gets pulled down with them into the depths, which I think is one of the casualties is Lister, and it's a couple of these other really important parts of it are just getting torn down with these older systems that just want to make money. They just need to show their books that it's growing and that you're successful, right? Because if you make the same amount 10 years in a row in any business, you're just looked at as a failure with the common mindset of just capitalism and how we work, which is fine, right? And that's probably good, because if you are running a business, you want to be, if you're not growing, you're stagnating, right? But a university isn't that same way. I think there's certain things, right? Policing, universities, all these things, your goals, if your goal shouldn't be money, you shouldn't be held to the constant growth model that the rest of the world is, right? And you say that, and now you can start incentivizing yourself to go after things in the right way. As soon as you have that constant growth model applied to things that shouldn't, things go haywire. You see it every step of the way, right? If you should have some real goals that we value as a society, that should go above. It should be like the fire department, where we understand that this may not be the best, most efficient way of, I guess fire department's a bad way because they don't make any money, but you know what I'm saying? There should be different. We've got out of alignment with what our goals of what a university should do and what it's actually doing, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, that's a whole nother debate about the non-profit, non-for-profit tax designations within Canada. But
Right.
I mean, I don't think they've deviated from the mandate, which is be to, I would even distill it down to the mandate of a university is to create higher thought, or at least to incentivize people to become better people, to give them the tools to do it.
But did it not seem to you like every step of the way they were trying to discredit free thinking and listen to us, don't expose how you follow the party line, learn our way.
Goofy way of achieving it sometimes. I mean, I would say that we're looking at two separate issues here that have the unfortunate reality of being governed by the same asshole.
Right.
I mean, first of all, the U of A is a terrible, terrible example of an institution if we're going to look at fiscal constraint. Now,
right.
I mean, you're well aware I just finished my degree in the States now. And like two different systems, it's been interesting to contrast the two. But while still heavily government-backed education in the States, they are a little more aware of their bottom line. They still maintain the nonprofit or not-for-profit or whatever their parallel designations are in the States. Right. I don't know what to tell you, but the bottom line is important, but they're still maintain that mandate. The U of A has just been frivolously spending because their government budget compared to a state school budget or even a private school in the States that doesn't get government funding is fucking ludicrous. U of A is funds left, right, center at every opportunity. And the reality of what we've got going on here, and I'll circle back around to your ageism point, is that you've got an institution, a business, right, that has business units. So the institution's focus should be their number one business unit, which is educating and fulfilling that mandate of creating better individuals and elevating the province that they are a member of, or state or whatever. But they're also filling the void of a landlord now too. So they've got two conflicting mandates, because the mandate of an institution is to create better individuals and to better the world. The mandate of a landlord is to provide somewhere for someone to live. So I don't know. Yeah, right. So which is fine. I'm all right with that even too. You and I both know how much that little prison cell in Lister cost. They were making fucking cash off it.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, you're gonna charge me that many thousands of dollars for a prison cell in a 50-year-old building? Yeah,
Hmm.
you're doing okay.
Which speaks volumes in itself that people are
Yeah,
willing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars,
exactly.
be stuck with a shitty meal plan that nobody ever liked because of the culture and how amazing it was and what all these
Yeah,
intangible things were there. But I think what the message that sent to the university was, we it doesn't matter what we do here, people are going to pay for it anyway. Really, to
yeah,
them, it said we have the worst conditions pretty much ever, and people are still jumping hand over foot to come in here. We can do whatever we want, people are still going to
okay.
come.
Well, let me proposition this for you then.
Yeah.
What, uh, what did resident services provide? What did you have in Lister besides Dodgeball that you didn't have? Did you rented after? Did you buy a house immediately after, or did you rent for a bit?
I i did all 4 years of Lister, my degree, moved back home for maybe 9 months, and then moved up to GP, bought my first house, and have been
Okay.
off to the races ever since.
So you've never had an apartment building or anything?
No, no, I
Okay.
haven't.
Yeah. Well, allow
But
me to.
I understand it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just give you an example of my apartment in Houston right now, and I've had quite a few over the years. I've got a gym. You know, if it were big enough, it would have an actual basketball gym. There are apartment buildings that have that in Houston because it's fucking Texas. Why wouldn't you? But you see what I'm saying is that like the amenities we were provided at Lister really above and beyond Dodgeball, which was a resident ran
Mhm.
initiative. The only thing they provided was catering that we paid an arm and a leg for.
Yeah.
It was only because it fell under the government or the university's larger Airmark contract. So
Mhm.
basically, what I'm trying to say is take the residence model of an 1,800 student apartment building complex, whatever the fuck you want to distill it down to,
Mhm.
and use it like any other normal person would. I mean, we can rent to these people, turn a profit, and treat them like the responsible adults they are. Now, the issue we're running into is the 17-year-olds, but that's on approach any bit differently. They're still getting a cosigner, just like any landlord has to do for a 17-year-old signing a lease. I mean, they're making it complicated for themselves because they're trying to take that university mandate and push it onto the university. Now, I understand the issue because you talk about risk liability, right? They
Yeah.
are liable to these people. It's the same institution. The reality is, we just got to start treating them like fucking tenants. You know, here's a fine. You fuck up too bad, you're evicted. But the reality is,
100%.
nobody has any right to tell you in your own home or your rented home. Doesn't much matter if you can drink in there or not. Once I close that door, whatever I do is my own volition. Now, to
Mhm.
circle back to the ageism thing, I don't know if it's an antiquated school of thought on the higher echelons of the university so much, because those people are there for reasons. We want a board of directors because we want years of battle torn and war proven individuals to give their insights. What I do think is that institutions in administrative roles maybe attract people that aren't business centric. Maybe the gangster running resident services isn't there to run resident services. Maybe he's there because it's a relatively guaranteed job and he's into trying to
Mhm.
merge new cultures. When I think that somebody there needs to be an advocate for saying, you know, we can have two business units that exist under the same umbrella that function differently. Every
Right.
other fucking company in the world does it. It doesn't taint our mandate of delivering high quality residence at an affordable rate while still turning a profit to our students,
Mhm.
and it doesn't deteriorate the mandate of a university to build the better people of tomorrow and have a sound education system.
Right.
That's my opinion of the topic.
Mhm. And kind of just to go back to the my theory on the older people in those positions, I think you're right that that is what you want, and you want to have people with experience. But I think it's changed in the last couple of years, just with the rate of change. I think for last 300 years, that was always the best thought. You want the most experience, the most years to their name in those positions. But I think that was true when things were changing at the pace they were. I think the last 20 years, with how quickly things have changed, you have somebody that's 76 years old in there and trying to talk with this new era of transitioning from brick and mortar to online schooling. That's not the person you want in there, right? That's an extreme example, but even to knock it back to that, it just, they don't understand how social media and stuff has changed the culture of who these kids are. They don't even recognize these 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids that are walking in, because they're almost a different human bill at this point. You see what these kids that are born in 2000 walking into these places and talking to these people that have seen a couple wars and to their name. They might
Yeah,
as well fought in Vietnam themselves. Like, I think it's
yeah.
just
Hard to
it's
compare.
and I think that is more so what we were, and that's I think why we're not so quick to jump on it as an issue, because that was the traditional thinking of you want the most years in
Yeah.
those seats for how long. I don't think we've caught up to how much we've changed, and I think that is a statement that could apply to a million different things. I think that's a thing that society's going through right now, where we're changing at such a rapid pace. Things are developing at such a rapid pace that these 100 200 year old institutions and mindsets that we've been stuck with just don't apply anymore, or are just changing at such a rapid rate that we can't keep up anymore. And I think that's what people do. And I think that's with all these things, I think we're going to look back in 20 years from now and go, oh man, we didn't understand all these things. We didn't understand what social media was doing to people. We didn't understand what
I'll give
the
you that.
the rat race, right? I think we're going to look back on a lot of these things and go, holy shit, we had no idea what we're doing. And I think
Yeah.
one of those things is these people in these positions that aren't understanding and are, maybe it's not uh maybe it's not their fault, and maybe it just exacerbates that problem that we're speaking to, that as a society of just not catching up. When it becomes into that position, it just exacerbates the problem, because now they're in a really position where they are sculpting their
Mhm.
decision making, sculpts this next layer of or this next generation of kids that are coming into their care. But they don't there's such a vast disconnect between what their understanding and what these kids understanding is that it's exacerbated. And you have a 60-year-old CEO running a corporation with the average age of 38. It's a 22-year difference. Now you have a 77-year-old talking to these 19. That's a huge, like, that's 50 years
Yeah.
of incredible rate of change. You look at 50 years ago back to 1970. Look at 1970 to today compared to 1920 to 1970. Completely different stories, right? And had their own challenges too. They went through I think
Yeah.
you can point to a couple different things that happened between 1920 and 1970 that was, culture shifting and just game changing. But I would argue that the rate of change between 70 and 2020 and 20 and 70 is vastly different, and we don't fully understand what that is, just because we're trying to do the best we can with the knowledge we have, right? We are all just trying to figure it out as we go and trying to see these changes and how we're working with it, what is doing good, what's doing bad, right? And I think that's where I get more upset at people not taking the time to fully realize both positions, both sides, right? Like when we were talking about the Lister change that they made, if they would have really taken the time to sit down with a group of students to get their input, which I think I got to start seeing later in, they were starting to bring the students in more because of all the backlash that they saw. So they were making these changes, and not to parallel the riots and things that are going on right now, but there was a lot of pushback from the students that were fighting them and saying this is a bad change. We don't support this. And I think the only reason they started giving the students at least a little voice at the table was because of all that pushback and the demonstrations that went on from the students. But right from the jump, why does it need to take a? I mean, again, this is probably a thing that applies to way more situations than the one we're talking about. But why does it have to take a big demonstration for people to at least get both sides of the story? That should be that should be the minimum that you give, right?
I mean,
Of Go
that's
ahead.
fair, Nick. You're right, but nobody's knocking on your door to ask you your opinion, right? Like,
Right. Yeah, you
I
have
mean,
to go
that
shout it from the rooftops.
you got
But
to
but
go.
but in that but I remember that coming out. They must have announced it, I think, the summer of the year before I came to Lister. The first big change that had the first big uproar was the changing the drinking in the lounges, which
Yeah,
sucks that was the first one, because it sounds like a bunch of prissy kids asking for it. And oh, you can't drink in your lounges, you have to drink in your rooms. Like, what is that?
yeah,
Why are you crying over it? I wish that wasn't the first stone that they attacked and the one that we had to go and fight
yeah.
on, because it makes us look bad. But it's because they didn't understand the safety aspect of what I'm saying. I think the difference of allowing a safe spot where your room is 20 feet away and you have a lounge where you can drink and learn, especially just over the first few weeks, where sometimes that's the first time people have ever drank. I mean, I'm sure in your couple years in Lister, you got to watch people have their first experiences away
Yeah,
from their
yeah.
parents, letting loose, and it was much safer to do that on the floor, locked in. Now you just have them go in their rooms. Now, what happens if a kid just first time drinking, they're
Yeah.
locked in a room and he just locks himself in his room and he passes out on his back and pukes and chokes to death, right? Like, there's just so many things that I don't think it was there was good arguments to be had, but in the
Mhm.
attempt to try and make your good argument, you just got immediately labeled as a kid crying about your drinking space,
Yeah,
right? That's
yeah,
what it was. And that was what was so angering. And I think is echoed with what we're seeing now with the news media of lying to people and trying to think they know what's best for people and lying to them. People know, and people are adults, and when they're treated like children and not given a say and not at least allowed to try,
Mhm.
and if they fail, that's on them, but at least give me the chance to try and fail on my own. Don't just think you know better for me, right? Which is the
Yeah.
biggest example of this, and people, if they are listening to the other podcasts, are probably sick of this. The biggest example I saw of this was when the US decided or realized we don't have enough PPE for our doctors.
Mhm.
What can we do, right? I think they had two options at that point. I think because of the patrioticness of America, they could have went, you know what, a good leader. I don't know if the leader that they have right now would be the leader to do this. I don't know if he has within him, but any leader, it didn't have to be the president. Anyone that was well respected, even Obama or something could have stepped up at that point. Anybody and said, "We fucked up. We don't have enough PPE for our medical staff. America's a great place. We stand up when we admit our mistakes. If anybody that stocked up on masks could donate it to the
Mhm.
hospitals, I think they would. But what they decided to do instead was, holy shit, we fucked up. What can we do? Let's make an announcement to the public that masks don't work, knowing full well that masks work to whatever degree. They had that knowledge. We've had that knowledge for 50 years now. We know very well the effects of masks and droplets. It's all been studied, but they decided to, because in their heads, and I'll give them that, they think it's with the best intentions, right? We're lying to the people because these first line responders is what need this. And that's the course of action they took. They sent Fauci out there in March and they said, no, masks don't work. Nobody should be buying them. We need them for the healthcare workers. Nobody should be wearing them. And then once they got enough masks built up, the stock built back up, and enough people said, "What the fuck is that?" That they came out and backtracked on that. But I just think now you've lost all your goodwill with the people. Right now, next time they say something, they can just look to that. Well, are you being honest with us? There's such a different feeling, and it was immediate. That feeling of, I've been lied to. You didn't give me the chance to
Mhm.
act like an adult. You assumed I'm a child. I think that feeling happens all the time nowadays with the news. Instead of just reporting things accurately, they think, what what does America or Canada need right now? What is the best course of action? Let's just tailor this, cut off the clips. If it's a full speech he gave, if we just put this part, it makes him sound really bad, and he's a bad person. We need to get him out. You're just lying to people, whether for good, bad, or ugly. We'll yet to see. It's still up in the air. But I think that in itself, of not giving people the chance to be adults and trying to spoon feed them and lie to them, is just causing so much errors. And I think you see that with the universities. That's kind of what brought me onto this whole thing. Is I feel like every step of the way they treated everyone like babies. And I understand that it probably seems like you're working with babies when you are trying to wrangle 18 to 21-year-olds. I can't blame them for thinking that way, but you
Yeah.
can't. You have to at least give them the chance. You have to at least give them a chance to have their voice heard and make a strong argument back, or make a poor argument back. It doesn't have to be strong or poor. It just has to be made. You have to have the opportunity to make your argument, because I firmly believe that if they had an actual realized system where they would have taken our points and treated us like equals, like
Mhm.
adults, and sat down, we could have found a really middle ground with lots of these things. And I think going forward, if we would start doing that, giving people the opportunity to make a
Mhm.
decision for themselves, we'd see a lot better, and there'd be a lot less negativity in the world, because it just creates so much unrest and so much uncertainty when everyone's lying to you and everyone's just trying to fit their own narrative, and cutting clips and clickbait titles. How mad does it make you to click on a thing on online, and it's completely unrelated to the title? The title says Bill Pickering arrested for
Yeah.
a drug felony or something, and then it's like, oh no, he was just pretending. He met a cop and he was pretending to pose in the backseat. Like, completely 180 degrees difference, right? That
Mhm.
erodes at the public's goodwill with the media and the people doing this. If you want to keep pushing that and keep lying to people, people are going to stop listening eventually, right? And I think that's why you see the I mean, take the COVID stuff out of it, the news media was dying. You see these mainstream medias, these traditional ones, nobody's watching them anymore, except for a certain subset of people that just left it all. They had their news channel they listened to, that was their Bible, and they leave it on all the time. You have that, but that's a very small percentage. It just, the only thing that kept them going is now with a pandemic, everybody turns on the news. They get so scared, they go back to what traditionally over the last, even though they've been lied to the last 10 years or
Mhm.
so and kicked around by them, when you're scared, you go back to what's natural. You go back to your news that you just throw on. You throw on your CTV and you watch it. But I think now, when everything's on the line and you are so scared and all you want is just honesty, just be straight up with me. I'm so scared. I hear all these different messages, and then there's very clear cut um, examples of them purposely lying to you. like I said, with the best intentions, a lot of the time they think this is what's best. This is what they need to hear. We know better than you. We're going to frame it to you this way so that there's no way you can look at it. You have to do this. I think that just erodes. And I think when we see us start to climb out of this, I think that was the last death toll for a lot of these places that, okay, we're giving you one last chance because we're really scared right now and we need some honest reporting. And then you go keep the same bullshit you done up. I think that's the last straw. If I had to be honest with you, I think we're going to see a lot of people going to, YouTube news site of just independent people that have their own YouTube channel that do. I think we're going to see a lot of people going towards that. I think we're going to see a lot of people going towards podcasts. Anybody that will do long form, because the media itself, or the media, not in that sense of the word, but just TV media, the way they structure everything with commercial breaks, you have to fit everything into this quick soundbite, and you can't discuss a big issue like a pandemic in 10 minutes. You need time to go over and have all these discussions. Discuss the economic impact and the lives lost to that. Have a really well-rounded discussion on it, and that's what people are just aching for. Everyone's crying out for that, and nobody's fulfilling it. And I think they had a real opportunity to switch gears and try and change what they're doing and give some real accurate reporting. But instead of that, they doubled down on what the last, clickbaity shit, because that's how they've stuck around. That was kind of their last, like I said, with the university, of just clawing and pulling down anything with it. I think when they start to see their numbers dip, that's what the last 10 years of this clickbait stuff has been. Okay, nobody's really coming to our news channels. Okay, well, we have to go to online. What's the easiest way to draw traffic? Make a super clickbaity title, right? And that's works for a little bit. It starts to pump your volumes up. You get those clicks, but eventually people start to learn the game. My biggest example, and I know I've talked about this on the podcast already, but a Forbes. I used to love Forbes. Forbes used to be an institution, but now if you ever go on Facebook, you look at a Forbes article, 9 times out of 10, the article has nothing to do with the title every time. But now to me, I can't look at Forbes. Even when I try and look at Forbes, I just have such a distaste for them now because of that and the constant lies that they fed out. Why would anybody listen to him? And it's so mind blowing to me to watch these institutions like a Forbes that has spent, I don't know how long Forbes been around. I'd say at least 50 years on just a guess, but 50 years of equity and brand that they built up with people over those years. And just to watch them in the matter of the last 3 or 4 years, just burn all that equity on let's throw everything on the fire, burn everything, burn it to the ground on their way out to try and make that last dollar on those clicks. It's just, what do they think? I don't understand what the long game is there. What do they think is going to come of that?
That's a curious breakdown, Nick. And I gotta ask you if you seriously think people give enough of a fuck to actually switch media streams. Like, that's what I'm wondering. Is this Forbes shit working, right?
Yeah, because
how many people are going to fringe news sources and staying, or how many people are relying on Facebook? Because we're not the generally. Okay, let's break it back down to Lister, since that's been the vein that's connected.
Yeah.
And you can't really equate, North American media or global media to the microcosm of Lister. But I see what you're saying there. But how many people on your floors sent letters to the dean of students, sent letters to the head of res services? Like, it's easy to be pissed off, but we're always waiting for people to come hear our opinion. It's easy to, I guarantee you, half of them put something on Facebook, but you know where the dean of students isn't looking for feedback?
Facebook. Exactly.
Well, people that take some of the onus on themselves and fucking pull up their boots and get out of bed and say something about it. Now, by the same token, are you right? We're being disrespected, and we're not. We're being treated like this is what you need, not asking, not having a reporting with integrity. But I really just don't know. I think a lot of people have become so complacent that. It's been interesting to watch coronavirus unfold in Texas, and whether or not you want to get into the wearing the tinfoil hats and talking about the hoax and was it built in okay, that's not even what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is we were given a pretty unilateral message that this is fucking dangerous. Whether or not you're in your 20s or teens and it's probably not going to hurt you, or maybe it will. It's pretty dangerous. So, not to be selfish, we should, do certain things. And rightly so, a lot of Americans got worked up and protested. And protest is beautiful. People were standing outside of barbershops with firearms, protecting them from the militia, or from police, saying, no, like, I have a right to operate my business. It's my choice. Well, I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but what I am saying is that unless there were people that did protest, but by and large, people just didn't give a fuck about the lockdown. They gave her the old college effort, the 4 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the, but
4 weeks, exactly. That's what I was going to say. For 4 weeks,
yeah,
and that gave me actually a lot of faith because I thought it
yeah,
was pretty amazing for the first four
right,
weeks. And I mean,
yeah,
Texas obviously very different from Canada, but
yeah,
for me to see that they said, "Holy shit!" and like you saw, we didn't know what it was. We were operating, and I thought, and I have no problem with that at that point.
right. It blew.
We let's overreact. Of course,
Yeah,
what's the worst that can happen if we come out of it a couple weeks later, right? And I was given so much faith by how quickly everyone jumped to it, everyone put in place, every business put a, if they were an essential business like we are, right? We bring fuel to the town, we're an essential business. So we, in a matter of like 12 hours when it really hit that one, I think it was
yeah,
March 12th, it was a Friday. By Monday rolled around, I had policies for every office, right? We designated one because our warehouse doesn't have a bathroom. So we'd have to have one bathroom. So we put lines on the floor, put one bathroom for the warehouse staff, one for the office staff. Office staff was just going to work and home, couldn't go anywhere else other than grocery shopping, right? We had plexiglass put up. All our drivers would just have to, only people in our dispatch office was the dispatchers. They'd have to text, say, when is my paperwork ready? And just go grab it through the door. They'd leave it outside the door, right? We had everything in place to be able to still function because we're an essential service. But I was so blown away by that human ingenuity that everybody did. It wasn't just us. Everybody that was going to keep working, and anyone that didn't have to keep working, they were in homes, locked down. But like you said, about 4 weeks in, there was you could feel it.
yeah,
Everyone kind of got everyone for good, bad, or ugly. Everyone kind of got sick of it. You could start to see it was the first sunny week of the kind
yeah,
of thing in Canada, and you see, holy man, everyone's really outside now, and everyone's kind of grouping up, and then you hear all these reports. You look on Snapchat, and a bunch of your friends are all in one house and kind of doing it, and you see it fall apart, which is, like I said, good, bad, or ugly. I think that's just human nature. I think that's what we're playing at. It was great to see that people would, answer the bell. What worries me now is because of their now, clearly, a couple weeks in, we found some more information. I think the first one that I saw was maybe the death rate isn't what we thought it was, right?
yeah,
And it wasn't even able to be mentioned on the news. I had the news on 24/7. They never, I still to this day haven't heard mention the new, and maybe down the States is different. This is obviously Canadian media, but they never mentioned that once that there was a new thing, which is, again, one of those things where it seems like they just don't want to, they think it's better to not even mention it because
mhm,
we don't want people to not take this seriously. But I think that reluctance to admit that it's not what we, it's not to say that you were wrong or anything. I completely agree with the tact we took at the start because that's the information we have, but you have to
mhm,
be able to pivot. If you get so locked into your position that with new information comes in, you refuse to acknowledge it.
yeah,
Now that hurts on the next one because I think the longer it goes without people acknowledging that it wasn't what we thought it was, we still have to
mhm,
take it seriously. There still could be a second wave. We still have to be smart about it, but it wasn't what we thought it was until they say that. Every day that goes by with them just hammering on trying to stick with their position because they don't want to be looked on as hypocrites,
yeah,
it's another nail in the coffin of when a real pandemic comes, people aren't going to listen. That's what scares me is now this lying to the public and this trying to do what's best is creating a really scary dynamic for when the real one does come because we're way overdue, right? That's why everyone was so scared. Anybody of a certain intelligence level has ever had the discussion of there's a to every 70 80 years a big worldwide pandemic comes through and kind of culls the herd a little bit. We're way overdue, right? That happened. Everybody knew that, and that's why I think that's personally why I was, I've been waiting for this. I'd always kind of heard that. That was always a message I heard, in the zeitgeist. Hey, we're due, we're due, we're due. So when this coronavirus thing came on, I remember in January I was watching videos of just on Twitter because that was the first thing you could see all these videos of in China how they were dealing with it and at the end of January, and it's like, oh, that looks pretty serious, like just what they're doing, the reports that were coming out. So I was a little worried about it, but I just think that reluctance to pivot and just admit, not, you don't even have to admit you were wrong, like
mhm,
just admit that new information is coming out. I still, right, if I want to defend my position of at this time with the information I had, that was a smart decision to make,
yeah,
and everyone
yeah,
would probably, I don't think anybody can go back to that first week and how scared everyone was and they won't
mhm,
question that decision. But now going forward, if we refuse to admit that and start to use the new information we have,
yeah,
now it starts to sow that that
mhm.
unrest, and it puts us into a really scary place going forward in my head. I just
What
wish they'd be honest the whole time.
what kills me, and I mean, how many times have you heard people say a similar thing to this? The happy medium. Why couldn't we find? We've talked about it 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
Why'd you have to go to such a hard line position? Why couldn't you find the middle? And people always say that in political
Mm-hmm.
debate. Like, did you have to go that aggressive? And that's what my opinion, because I only really, really closely follow, maybe a little bit of British because of Boris Johnson, but largely Canadian and American news.
Mhm.
And like, could we have got two more polar opposite? I mean, I don't know what else to call them other than fucking goobers trying to lead this effort.
That's
Like we,
the other thing to talk about. It's depressing to hear the speeches they give because all you need in a time like this, decision making for sure, but you have whole cabinets and teams that are making the decisions at this point. It's almost out of the leader's hands at that point. It's into the medical community and to a certain point. But what you are responsible for, like I said, with that mass thing of if you
yeah,
would come out, it's just that leadership of all we want to do is see something, put the script away and talk to us.
yeah,
Reassure us. Well, all we need. I mean.
yeah,
You can talk about Obama and all the drone strikes and all the bad things that came with him,
yeah.
but you want an orator that if you wanted someone in this time that could at least speak
He's
to
a good
everyone and
guy.
calm down,
Yeah, yeah.
he was that guy that we need, to just come out and say. And then you have Trudeau that just it's every day, say 9 o'clock, he comes out, he reads off his script, and then when it goes to the questions, he dances on the questions, but you get no leadership from it. It just feels like a canned speech. It's he does his little wry smile. It's so pedantic at this point. Like, why even
And
turn it on?
not substantive. I mean, like they're two guys walking in different directions, but like neither of them is conveying. I mean, somebody needs to sit down in the room and somebody with a few Ronald Reagan tapes on hand and be like, "You're a fucking soundbite. We're
Yeah,
gonna let you talk. I want you on for 60 seconds. Tell us we're great, we're strong, we're gonna get through it.
yeah.
Put the doctor on."
Just give us a little something to go with, right? And it doesn't.
Yeah,
And I think that's what's amazing right now is I think what we're going to start to see more of is if that's not going to come from that leadership where by all rights that's where it should be coming from, but clearly
yeah,
at this point it's been how many months and we haven't had any sort of good real leadership from either America or us Canada or the us. We haven't really seen any good leadership come, but I think that's where we're going to start to see um
hmm,
people turning to. And this is going to circle back to a point we kind of already covered off, but I think where you were saying the laziness of people to switch medias, I think
yeah,
what's given me a little bit of hope is you see a couple, just I don't follow a ton of I just don't have the time. I would love to follow more, but I follow a couple independent YouTube journals, and their channels are exploding right now, Bill, like
really,
doubling in the last and I think, and that's what I'm saying, that's what's leading me to think that this is that last straw of people. Like, I think lots of people had kind of already given up on the CNNs and the Fox News because they know, like, oh, well, clearly, like, I'm not on these. I'm not really super far left or right. Like,
yeah,
neither of you are talking to me. So I'm giving up on it. But with this coronavirus coming on, they're going, holy shit, I know I don't really like you guys, but I need some. I'm so scared. And then to be treated like that, now they go,
yeah,
okay, this is so serious. Like, I see where you're saying a lot of time people are so lazy, but I think it took something like a pandemic
yeah,
where now I desperately need this information. It's not,
yeah,
news. 99% of the time, news is it's good to have. You can pick it up. You should, if you want to be a good member of society, you should. But you really don't need to listen to it. But when this pandemic hit, you need it. It is now uh, shows the necessity of what it is
yeah,
in times of struggle. Right back in times of war, the news was the radio was huge for letting everyone know what it was. But I think this is that last kind of influx of them to give them that one last shot for them to do things right and actually give us some good information and for them to treat it how they have. Both sides have fumbled it, right? You look at Fox News and CNN on both sides, and they're
yeah,
both lying to the people and trying to just frame everything how they want. That you've lost. That was your last shot to do it, and now I think is the going to be the mass exodus as things calm down in the fear level. And I think I think that's why the other part of it now is when you turn on the news, it seems like you would never see a good story. There was no positivity. Everything was fear, 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 because I think they're seeing, oh, everyone's coming back to us right now. And everyone's why? It's because everyone's so scared. Well, what can we do? Just keep everyone scared, right? Show the scariest stories, right? The average age of death is 70 some or whatever, but they're not showing every story of that. It's every time there's a 35-year-old fitness instructor. That's what was on
yeah.
the news, and they're showing the
That's more
scariest
fun.
the scariest way they can frame it. Now they're doing the same thing with the economic downturn. On obviously, I'm not watching American news, but at least in Canada right now, they're just trying to frame everything as the scariest possible aspect. And I think that
Mhm.
just is the exact opposite of what you need right now. You need that leadership and getting people uh, to someone to tell them it's okay. Now, if all they're hearing is the negativity and what's going wrong with the world and all these bad, 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 it's just spiraling and amplifying the negative effects of this. And we need that. And I think that's why people are jumping ship to these more, you know, um, even when things are still tough.
Mhm.
If you were a CNN guy for your whole life and you love CNN, but this is just their last straw, and you go check out a couple independent medias, and you get to feel that genuine that genuine feeling of, okay, this guy isn't bullshitting me, right? You
Yeah.
watch Trump or Trudeau speak, it's none of it's so disingenuous the whole time. Almost, they're trying to play a game, but as soon as you get that feel of now people are actually talking honestly about the news, it's like this, oh, you can take that breath.
Mhm.
It's such a big feeling that I think people are going to start, like you say, I think that is a huge part of it. I think that's a piece I've been
Yeah.
missing to my theory, is that laziness. I think that's what's been stopping the mass exodus from going. Or I think before, well, oh, this is what it is. The theory is coming to me as I'm saying, but I think what it was,
Yeah.
as I'm saying it, is people would be so upset with CNN and Fox News and the lie. It became bullshit. But the alternative was, I'm just not going to watch. I just don't watch the news. I just don't follow it. I know it's bullshit, so they just step back. I think that's
Mhm.
what we were seeing for so long. But it took something
Yeah.
like this to go, I don't have, stepping back isn't the opportunity, right? Like for me, I hated the news. When I'd watch it, it'd be so negative. I could feel my energy bar go down as I'm watching it, right? I could tell it was very negative for me. But because I ran a business and because things were changing so fast, I had to have CTV on in my office all the time to be up with it, because they were changing rules of how many people could
Yeah.
be in a room together. It was constantly changing all these new benefits that were coming out. They were just coming out through the news, right? You were handcuffed to them, and it was so frustrating for me to be forced to watch this drivel and this obvious
Mhm.
disingenuity the whole time, that when I did, that's kind of what led me to, well, who else? There's got to be people. It's 2020. There's got to be some people speaking some honest news, and just did a little investigation. That feeling of finally having someone just treat like an adult, right? It might still be just as scary as what they're saying, but at least it's honest. You feel so much better about it. And I think that's what's going to make it stick. I think for a long time too, or maybe it was, um, they would go check it out, but it wouldn't stick. They wouldn't stay, it wouldn't have the staying power. You might watch a couple of videos of a guy on YouTube that you might come back to every couple of months, just, or if
Yeah.
there's a topic you want his take on, you go back to. But I think this is where we're starting to see it actually take over. And you see these groups of, uh, I don't want to name a couple just because I haven't listened to them enough to say if they align with my politics of what I'd want to support. But at least they seem obvious or honest at first glance in the last couple of weeks of listening to them. But it just feels so nice to have at least someone speaking language. It seems like right now everything's so crazy and there's so much disinformation going on, and people trying to frame things that all you want for, you don't want it to be good. You're not looking for someone to cherry coat nothing. It doesn't have to be cherry coated. All you want is honesty. And I think that is going to be the biggest change, not only in media, but just everywhere, start to finish. I think that's what people are grasping for. And I think news is just the easiest one to point at because it's so cut and dry that that's what the issue is, right? It's all, you're reporting information. That information is true or false. It's so black and white. But I think even places that aren't strictly distributing information, there's still that
Mhm.
playing that game of that politics and how you frame things, right? Even if it's not the news. But I think that's where we don't want anything that's going to be framed. We just want honesty. And I think that's what scares them so much and why they're leaning so hard into framing it the way they want,
Yeah.
because they don't want to lose that. That's a position of power to have that over people of
Mhm.
people come to you for that information. You are that source. You're that czar that holds all this in. They don't want it to start going. They don't want all these independents
Mhm.
on YouTube to start taking everyone, start to listen to them. They want to keep their seat of power, and they're also funded by certain people that want it to stay the same. So they just lean all the way harder into who's paying them, right? And who butters their bread at the end of the day, whether it's Fox News doing it for the right or CNN doing it for the left. They're still doing the same thing. Like I say, in my head, doing that last clawing bits to take down whatever they can to make their last little cash before they're a thing of the past. In my head, that's the way I
I mean,
see it.
I definitely anticipate, or at least have observed, that our generation is getting their news differently than my parents' generation, right?
Yeah.
Your mom and dad and my mom and dad turn on the news at 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock and watch the evening news, right?
Mhm.
You and I don't do that. I mean, I don't watch the 6 o'clock news. I read my news in the morning, or I get it delivered to my phone, or
Mhm.
e-journals, or you're right, independent journalists or podcasts such as yourself. But at what point are we? I mean, I'm not gonna say that you and I sitting here are as guilty as MSNBC of fabricating facts or
Right.
of putting things out there that maybe could be misconstrued as leading the public in the wrong direction. But
Mhm.
I mean, where are our fact checkers? Where are our peer reviewers? Right? You and I
Mhm.
have opinions, and just like any good media source, no media source is nonpartisan or
Mhm.
bipartisan. Rather, every media source has a bias. The realistic idea should be acknowledging that bias. And Ben Shapiro is a good one. I'm sure you've watched a few Ben Shapiro
Yeah.
videos in your day. I like him. I agree with him 80% of the time,
Right.
maybe. maybe more, but he's just a smart guy. You know,
Mhm.
even when it's wrong, I listen to him and I go, well, at least you framed an argument. But
Mhm.
at least he's the first guy to sit up there and go, like, yeah, I'm fucking right wing,
Mhm. Yeah,
right? Like,
and I think even if you are have your bias, and I also think what the biggest change too, I think that just recently what we've seen and what I think is a very powerful aspect that not a lot of people fully understand yet is only in the last maybe 6 7 years has this real clickbaity
mhm,
super duper bias, like not even trying to hide, because it used to be, they had their slant, but for the most part they were still giving you accurate information. They weren't purposely trying to cut things out and frame things in a disingenuous way to
yeah,
change the actual meaning of what that person is saying, right? And I think when that started to catch on, it was, I almost think whoever's in power, I think it is a disservice to the person in power. The opposition media does more to support them, because when this change, right, I'm not, I want to make this argument, but I don't want to say that it's not, the right doesn't do this too, and it's mostly in the States. So I see Trump give a speech, they take part of that speech, cut out the rest, and just make a headline and try and say this is what he was saying. But then it's 2020. You can't do, like, I think that would have worked. You do
mhm,
that 20 years ago. There's no way to go back and fact check if
yeah,
that is actually what he said. You just take it at face value. But now 20 different Twitter accounts pull up the headline that they're trying to say of what he said and the clip of the full clip, and now it's gone. And now you've just bolstered the other side. You've done their work
mhm,
for them. You've showed that you're disingenuous, right? You've lied
that's
to, and
fair.
now even those people that don't really like Trump, or that are super in the middle, they see that and they get angry, right? And it's not to say that Fox News doesn't do the same thing, but they're not in power right now. They're not the ones that are really trying to tear down and get somebody out of office like they are trying so hard to do with Trump.
Mhm,
But I think what they're trying to do is having the complete opposite effect. I think that's what they saw in leading up to it. They said, going back to the whole mask thing about telling people what they think is good for the country, it doesn't matter
mhm,
what they actually think. We have to make the decision for them. So they were so sure that Trump was the worst thing that's ever going to happen to the states. Not saying that they were wrong in that assessment, right or
mhm,
wrong, it doesn't matter. But they were so sure of that fact that they tried to frame every single thing, everything he said, the way he did it. He said enough dumb shit on his own that probably could have
yeah.
uh,
And we
hurt
should
hurt
have
hurt him.
bend over backwards to make him look stupid. I mean,
Exactly, and that's
he's these last 6 months, he's looked awfully fucking stupid. He's done everything wrong he could, but
exactly. But I think if they would have just, if you let that happen and just
yeah,
accurately report on it, or even go back to how you were before, where clearly you have your stint and you're going to report it from
yeah,
our side. But as long as you're not disingenuous in how you go about it and start to cut up clips and make clickbaity
I,
titles, that is what pisses
yeah,
people off and sends them back the other way. I think they're trying so hard to say, you know what, America, you don't know what's good for you. We do. We know Trump is the worst. And America goes, no, we agree with you. Yeah, we don't think this is the best course of action. But now they
yeah,
go, oh, okay. And then they start framing all this stuff, cutting his speeches, making it sound like
yeah.
he's saying all these things, and they go, "Well, no, I'm still with you that he's not a good guy, but you're clearly lying to me. I just
Yeah,
fact, I
right.
just watched the whole speech. It's very inaccurate. What are you doing here?" And that happens so many times, and then the other side, and then but now people, what happens when you try and say that? Well, I agree that Trump's not very good, but that bullshit. Oh, you're a Trump, and they jump down your throat and call you all these names. You're, holy shit! I'm not. No, I agree with you. I'm on your side, but I
Yeah,
just don't like how you're going about it. And that happens enough and enough and enough. And pretty soon, maybe not everybody, but a certain percentage of them that are really in the middle, that pisses them off enough that I'm going to say I'm not voting for Trump, but in the end, fuck these guys. I'm going to vote for that guy. You try and pull all this bullshit. It's like, I think that's really, I don't want to go out on a limb and say this as fact, but I would put a lot of money on, is that just what won him the election. I think they
oh,
thought, and that's why the polls were so fucked, because there's so many people that they bullied and bullied into saying, if you even make an argument any way that isn't this party line, you're this, that, and the other thing. That's what lied to him. And what worries me again, if the last 6 months is really, like you said, I don't think he's handled it very well, and he's made some poor decisions and that. But I think all these the ways they're reporting it is just pushing people still that other way. I'm almost sure he's going to win again because of that reason. For no other reason than that, is because people are told that you don't know what you're talking about. You guys, you idiot. I feel like this is what they're thinking. You idiots voted this guy in and now we're stuck with him. We are going to do everything in our power, slant everything, cut every clip to make sure everyone knows exactly how bad this guy is. But in doing that, all they need to do is just, okay, you guys voted him in. Let's see what happens and right on it recording. And I think that they'd see. And now when he does do things like we can both agree on the last couple weeks, probably more so than anything, has been pretty rough. And things that he does just you can't even the most intelligent of the Ben Shapiros are going to make have a hard time making an argument for what he's doing at the time, right? If you
Yeah.
would just, instead of sticking to your game plan of what you're doing before, just back off a little bit and just write it accurately and let the story run its course, let people make their own decisions, it's going to go the other way. But when you still double down on that and start, still every step of the way chopping up clips, make clickbaity titles, it's just pushing the other way. And I have a strong worry about that, just because I think for what I don't know, probably financially it would benefit me for Trump to win again if I'm honest, but just for what it is, and almost it's not even, it doesn't really matter to me who wins or not. It's just to watch people invest so much time and effort to a cause, which is getting making sure Trump doesn't win, and to be actually doing the opposite just blows my mind. Just to watch the inefficiency of this, of you people are trying so hard to make something happen and all you're doing is the complete opposite, right? We've seen it so many times where there's so many times where 95% of people are in agreement of one thing or another, right? You don't have to argue it, but then you go so hard railing for the super edge case of whatever subject you're talking about that you end up alienating. Now you had to start, you had 95% of people, but now the 15% most crotchety ones that would, understood that this is I'm trying to think of a good example that doesn't make me look heartless. Because it's always these progressive issues, but usually for the most part, if it's a reasonable progressive issue, most people are on your side, right? If you could put it just to a public vote like we do for the president, but just for a civil rights issue, most people would be on the right side of it. You're definitely going to have your ones on the other side, but then if you go and rail and try and put the edge case forward of, what's a good one? Okay, so transgender rights, right? Most people, if you look at it, probably maybe not 95% of people, maybe it's not, but 80% of people probably want them to have certain rights, and whether it's their own bathroom, that might be too much for some people just on the cost alone of what it is, but for the most part they're not railing against it. They don't really have a problem with it, but then you try and um, tell them that they're a bad person because they don't think that a male that's transitioned to a female can go through the Olympic boxing and just not tell anybody and beat the crap out of these, right? There's certain edge cases that if you want to fight through, you're going to lose some of the populace, right? That is already on your side to begin with. And just things like that, where you have such a goal in mind of what you want, and in your head, it's completely righteous, right? Trying not to get Trump elected in the next election from their position and their worldview of what they've come up with. I can see where that would be a virtuous effort on their part. I can fully wrap my mind around that. But if in trying to do that, you're hurting your own cause, like how, first of all, how can you not see that happened once and then are lining up to do it again? How can you have the arrogance to treat people as such idiots that they can't make their own decisions and need to be spoon-fed these facts the way that you say them because they're not smart enough to make their own decisions? It's going to backfire. Like, it's just it just blows my mind that this isn't a mainstream discussion of clearly what is happening. The effect of their consequences aren't even seen. It blows my mind that more people aren't banging their drum about this.
When Mitt Romney ran for president, he got in a hell of a lot of hot water and arguably lost the presidency over it. And then Hillary Clinton had a similar issue. But I'm sure you've heard the 47% phrase. With Mitt Romney, he was videotaped on a cell phone saying, in a Republican luncheon with a bunch of donors, saying, "Listen, here's the reality of American politics. 47% of people will vote Republican and 47% vote Democrat. I don't care about the 47% Democrats. I need those 6% Republicans. That's what I work for." Hillary Clinton said a similar thing about 47% of Americans are going to vote for Donald Trump. Creeps and bums was the phrase she used talking about Trump supporters, right? But it really is that battleground for that ever important 6% as politics becomes increasingly divisive and Oh man, that's the second time that's happened, Nick. I need more beer left here. I'm not sure yet.
Fair enough,
But
but I can probably hop right on that train of thought that you were having.
I'll tell you what,
Is
let me use that as a pause, and I'm going to run and use the washroom quick.
me too, and we'll hop right back into her.
Okay, sounds good, buddy. All right, Nick. I got 3 more for the second half. We're
There
ready.
you go. There you go. So yeah, right where I was going to jump in on that is I see what you're saying with that 6%, and I think that is that 6% is as the world grows. I think that is growing, and I think there's
Mm,
still the people in power still think that it's these everyone is super left and super right. I think it's becoming more and more that the middle is the majority. You know, the majority of people, it's usually one or two issues that pull them onto one of these two sides. But it just blows my mind at this how far we've come. We can put people on the moon, but we can't have single issue voting on some of these things. You know, we have online, you know, with and then you say, well, that's not secure, but
well, yeah.
has it really been
Direct democracy is the least fiscally responsible thing we can do. I mean, just one election to a vote a prime minister is, one of the most onerous undertakings. So direct democracy, voting on individual issues, simply can't work. That
right?
being said, of course, what's the better solution? And it certainly isn't pandering to these 47 on either side. And that's interesting. I'd never really considered the 6% to be growing. I definitely thought it was bigger in Canada, but I'm really curious to hear more about what you say of that because I like that. That's interesting.
I think, well, then I'll go right from there. So
Yeah.
I think it's growing, and I think it's another byproduct of this because the representative of the far left and the far right of the news
Yeah.
media of that with the the tact that they're taking so lately, it's pissing people off and it's pushing people away from them. But if you're a CNN guy all your life, die hard, but just lately they pushed it too far, that doesn't mean you're jumping over. You're not going to still go turn on Fox News, even that you've been uh, ostracized from the left enough. You're going somewhere in the middle, and I think more and more people are falling off that and seeing that this is absolutely ridiculous. That we've gone past this point. We that is what the powers that be. You know, you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to put your tinfoil hat on, but I mean, there's a lot of powers that go above
Yeah.
the media, and all they want is for people to keep squabbling between the left and the right, because at that point they're not looking at the real issues, right? That is their end goal. They don't care who wins. They've got control over both sides at the end of the day, but they want the squabble to continue. And I think that is what people are waking up to, because I think it's all these power structures that were put in place over the years were done. So how do you keep power? So, you know, you have to control information, you have to
Mm-hmm.
control resources, right? And with the technological leaps that we're having, we're putting power into the hands of the people more and more so every day, and they're fighting more. You can see it. They're trying to they're trying to regain that power in other ways, you know, trying to look at your search history and all those things. They want that because the way they can sit in power is to control everything. But I think over the last probably 10 years specifically, maybe 5, more and more it's becoming harder and harder now. Like I said earlier, if you cut up a speech to make somebody look bad in 1987, it's really hard to fact check that. You might never hear the full speech of what it is, but more and more so people are fact checking everything. You hop on Twitter, you get the full rundown, which is so ridiculous to me that we're still doing these debates and stuff. We have the forums, you know, you could do a 6-hour podcast with two electives to work their way up, and you could have a really, you know, well well thought out, well said, you know, where you actually get a real good sense of who these people are as people. But we're not doing that because they don't want to. I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of powers that be that want this to continue, and I think the pushback against that is this movement to the middle, right? And people dropping off of these sides, they're starting to wake up to that, because it's hard to lie to it's becoming every day that the internet gains in power,
Yeah.
the ability for for them to lie to the masses decreases, and that's scary to them, right? Whoever them is, I don't want to go that far, but there's clearly people at that point of who that is. That
Yeah.
scares them to all hell, that people, right, go into independent YouTube journalists that are just, you know, cut through the bullshit of you know, can give you in 20 minutes, can give you the facts of how they were, because most of an hour broadcast, whether it's CNN or Fox News, so most of that is so much fluff packed in there to build up their whole side and paint it the way they want. If you really were just getting the facts and you didn't have all the other shit that comes with it, you could probably listen to that, or, you know, download that data in 20 minutes. That scares the hell out of them, that they're going to that, and that people are starting to see through this game, because now that takes away the squabbling, right? It sounds really cheesy, but that move towards unity and love and what people are really what we always were preaching throughout
Mhm.
the our entire lives, right? And that is what needs to catch on, and that's what really scares these people in power is that message of why are we squabbling between the left and the right? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't get us anywhere. We haven't accomplished anything. Look at the last. It's gotten politics has gotten the most divisive it's
Yeah.
ever gotten, right? The divisiveness of politics has increased like tenfold every year for the past 10 years. And
Yeah.
it's so silly to me. Why have we I did the same thing as you. I kind of lost where I was going with that. I had a good point to that. Yeah.
No worries.
The divisiveness
Yeah.
has grown, and here's where I was going. But
Yeah.
what is that showing? If we want to look back, okay, so we've ramped up into this divisive left versus right, this battleground more and more. But in terms of political progress, has that matched? Is that benefiting us? This squabbling between the two is taking up so much of our resources that we can't move forward on anything. And I think that's the big change that people need to wake up to. Is not only is this fight to be right, because that's what it is. If you're left or right, you just want to be right at the end of the day, right? And you have there might be one or two issues that you feel really strongly about, but for the most part, everyone's in the middle. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. That's where I think that middle is growing, because maybe it's one thing, maybe it's abortion, maybe it's taxes, maybe it's one thing that pulls you over to the side, but for the most part, everyone's pretty in the middle. Maybe guns, that might be one of there's a couple key things, but that's where I'm saying where it's not financial, but it's only a couple key things. There's only a couple things we really need to vote on as a country as a whole, right?
Mhm.
You vote on abortion, guns, taxation levels, and maybe two more that you could put all on one ballot for people, and take that out of the equation, and now you're actually voting for a leader. Right now, we're not voting for leaders. We're voting for caricature
Mhm. Eric.
caricature. Thank you. I don't know why I
Yeah.
can't say that word. We're voting for caricatures right now of this tribal thing of what we're trying to
Yeah.
show to, right? We have a perfect example of it. So now in the States, all they wanted was spectacle and circus, and look what they
Mhm.
got. They got
Mhm.
spectacle and circus. Canada, all we wanted was to be progressive, to be the most PC, um,
And you got
forward thinking, and we got it. That's what we got. But
it.
that's what we wanted, and that was, and I think it's a good thing. I think that is a great Canadian value that we have, and I think we were doing it right with how we were doing things. We always were on the progressive side, but it was like, oh, we're not doing fast enough. That's our identity. That's what we want to push towards. That's what we want to see, and that's what we got. We asked for it, and that's what we got. But now, why are we letting our decision on leaders? It almost doesn't matter. Look, the States is the perfect example right now. Trump and Biden are not very popular, even within their own subgroups, right?
Yeah.
They but it doesn't matter. So now everyone's saying, there's an argument that I keep hearing that people are saying, how can you vote for Joe Biden? He's clearly senile. He clearly is losing his touch with reality. And they're saying, I'm not voting for Biden. I'm voting for the cabinet. I understand that argument. You're saying, okay, you're right. He's going to have a group of people around him, and that's what you're. If you think that is the lesser of the two evils, but then why are we even doing this fraud then? If the leader
Yeah.
doesn't matter and you're just voting for the cabinet, why not make those couple key issues that we're really voting for? We're not voting for a leader, and then you could actually, if you knew that you didn't have to hitch your horse to a Biden or a Trump, you could just vote on the issues that matter to you, and then those are taken care of, and then you're actually voting just for someone who has good leadership qualities that you want, that's going to be a good representative. I think that would change what we're going for. Also, I think the benefit or the natural progression, and I think this upsets the power structure so much, like I was talking to earlier, and there's a lot of factors trying to keep those power structures in place. But I think a huge piece of it is just to make it so it's not just one person. I think the first step is going to make it so it's a tandem that run a country. You have
Mhm.
you have two people that run the country, and I think eventually it's going to grow to 3 and 4 and 6, or maybe you have a board of people. It's just too much for one person to do. It's ridiculous. But that's a feature, not a flaw, right? That's
Mhm.
to have it all be centralized onto one person gives you really good control over that person. As soon as you start to centralize it out, probably would work better, but now you lose that control, because now you have to control more people. You have to have more people at the end of the day that you have to have on the same page, on your page, doing you
Mhm.
putting forward your agenda. And I think that's what we're going to start to see, is more people waking up to that, and maybe there's more to it than just the spectacle of who you're voting for. And it's this team dynamic. People aren't voting, and they haven't for, I think this is the first time that people are actually explicitly saying, I'm not voting for Biden, I'm voting for a cabinet, just because the scenario surrounding it has made them have to admit that. But I think that's been happening for a long time, of how probably the last 60 years people have been voting for, like you say, that 47%. It doesn't matter who that person is, that they're voting left or they're voting right. That's all it is, right? And I think that is what is becoming less and less. And I think that is that middle piece growing, that they don't want to vote either way. They're unhappy with either side. I think that's that growing discontent middle
Yeah.
that is growing. It's not 6% anymore. I don't think it's been 6% for a long time, probably since the first time that Romney said that. That might have been, even then, probably wasn't 6%, but it's a nice, easy way to say it. And it makes them sound better to show that they have this huge base. That's what they'd like to think, right? In my head, that's what they like to think. It's 47% people are going to vote Republican and 47% are going to vote Democrat regardless. I don't think so. I don't even think they have that many voting numbers. I think just what is 50% of the people vote in America is a good turnout.
Well,
So now
47% of voters, but regardless, yes, I
right.
see you.
So now they're saying, so really, if you wanted to make a more accurate representation of the point they're trying to make, you'd say 21% of people are going to vote Republican, 21% are going to vote Democrat, and 3% is that swing. And the rest of that, what did they just do math to? 21, 42, 45, 46. So the other 54% of people aren't even voting, that don't care, or are in the middle enough and they don't see either one. They're so maligned with both of these sides that they don't want to. I think that is growing, and now it's starting to be forced onto them. If you have to, if you don't vote Democrat, you're a racist, you're a Trump supporter, you're forced into that. And if you vote Democrat, now you're this snowflake, you have no backbone, you're spineless, you're a hippie. It's just this tribal identity that has brought people into this. So now we can't even have a discussion. That was my biggest point of being upset about this pandemic, is that right from the start it was politicized, and it should have been that is the time for everybody to come together. This is the time that it should show everyone very clearly that this is all a silly game that we're playing, this left first right thing. No, we're all people, we're all trying to make the best decision.
Yeah.
But because it was immediately politicized, now you can't discuss it. You can't have an argument. If you argue the lockdown, or not even argue the lockdown, but someone like myself, where I was thinking, I'm so glad we locked down right away, and I was so inspired by everyone, how people jumped to it. I thought that was great. But as the new information comes in, we have to be able to discuss it. We have to, but it seemed like if you wanted to, right when that first came out, that the death rate might not be what we thought it was. It's not 4% like we thought it was. It's more closer to 1. I remember that being the big thing. They said the death toll is, or the death rate is way closer to 1% than it is to 4%. Right. Mm-hmm. At that point, you couldn't have that discussion. If you even brought that up, you were labeled as X, Y, or the other thing, which is just purely because of that tribalism. And if you don't allow people to have discussion, now we don't move forward. Now that creates a space where we're making these poor decisions where we are now. If 2 months ago, we could have went, okay, this isn't exactly what we thought. Let's reopen the dialogue. Let's, we all clearly were wrong, whatever, let's admit it. What is it now? Let's make a new decision from here. We'd be in a much better spot. But because people are so entrenched and they don't want to admit that because it was politicized, that's the only reason that they can't walk it back, and they're so scared to walk back anything they said, is because it's a political side. Now, by them walking it back, they're saying the other side was right because they politicized it. But that's not what we need, and that's the biggest function. I think when you allow politics to detriment your entire country, you allow politics to stand in front of saving human lives and saving the economy. Mm-hmm. What are we doing? What like that's at the point where we've go ahead.
We've got ourselves in a real interesting situation by my perception, Nick, because I've always long believed that the solution would be decentralization, right? Giving more power to regional authorities. I think the mayor of Grand Prairie should have a little more power. I think the premier of Alberta should have a lot more power. And I think the prime minister of Canada should have a lot less power. Now, that's kind of the thing they're running in the States, and look how that's fucking going, right? So the solutions I thought I may have had, I think, are still correct and honorable in virtue and at their core. But the reality is application. I mean, we shouldn't discredit the human condition's ability to corrupt any situation. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And that's is that we're seeing with democracy is that I had a great classics prof at the U of A once. He said, democracy is the greatest system. Democracy. He started his lecture, his history lecture or class, saying democracy will fail. It's simply the greatest system humans have conceived yet. Now,
exactly.
Again, tinfoil hat back on.
Yeah.
You know, something might happen one day. Who the fuck knows? But we are slowly watching. We're still adapting to democracy and finding out what it is and what it's capable of, and it's
Mhm.
developing and it's dynamic while as we're developing with it. We invented it, but we're watching our forefathers' creation grow with us.
Mhm.
And people are, democracy is sacred. It's a beautiful thing. I don't want to call it perfect, but I think it's as close as we've gotten to it so far. But I think people are starting to realize that, you know, where the rhetoric for so long has been it's perfect, it's the ideal system. Now people are starting to go, how did this tool get that much power? Like it,
Mhm.
what have we done? And really, is 3,000 executive orders in one presidential term, like, if you have to supersede the democratic process that many times? And I'm not just shitting on Trump. Obama signed more than any
Hun-
other president before him. Bush before him too. So like,
mhm.
it's not left or right. It's not this topic or that topic.
It's
What
the
it really
system
is,
itself.
it's the system. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's the point you were veering
Exactly.
toward. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, where I agree with you that the power shouldn't be so centralized into there, because that was one of my biggest things for just speaking to our own situation here. Calgary had probably the high, well, didn't probably had the probably 80% of Alberta's cases were all in Calgary. Maybe 15% of them were in Edmonton, and then up in Grand Prairie for the first I think right now we've had 16 cases now, but that was just in the last couple of weeks. But for the first 2 months of the pandemic, we had 3 cases. But we locked down just like we were in LA, right? We were locked down, nobody leave their houses at the start. Like I said, 4 weeks in. But it was thinking like, man, I wonder if we could have the freedom to. It's Alberta is just too big of a space to have one rule to fit everything, right? And that's where I see.
Exactly.
But where
Exactly.
I see the system as being wrong, and I think there's so much. I think people are starting to realize that the system, we may have moved past it. I think you're right that democracy is the best system we've come up with so far, but I think we may have not moved past democracy, but moved past democracy in its current form. But there's so many people that draw their power from democracy in its current form that there's these unassailable power constructs, these institutions that will never let it change from what it is and won't let it progress, because that is how they hold on to their power. There's companies and individuals that have the DNC and the, what's the other one,
The GOP.
GOP in their pocket, right? And
Mhm.
they don't want to see it decentralized from that easy point of power. Now they have to go control all these different people. If it's decentralized, now they have to have everybody in their pocket. Whereas if you can just keep it centralized to one person that you have to have kind of on your payroll or at least well funded by you, that's what's stopping it. But I think a lot of time, and again, I hate rehashing things I've said on other podcasts before, but there's a certain people know when they might not be able to articulate it, but human beings are incredibly perceptive. They know when things aren't right, and they know
Mhm.
when they're being lied to. They know when something is disingenuous. And I think that for the last while, people have realized that something isn't wrong. Something isn't right with this system. Something's wrong. And I think it's that feeling of everyone's realized we've moved past this and we're being forced into it. And I think that's why you're starting to see things crack, because it's these institutions and systems trying so hard to keep things with the status quo of how they've ran for the last couple hundred years. And there's this immense sense of we've moved past this. How are we still running the same weird electoral college, the same weird, election system that we've done for 300 years, when we can do, I can transfer you $3,000 and you can give me I don't know. There's just so many crazy. We can go to the moon. There's all these things. It just, I feel like people can't articulate it, but there's this sense of being of, we've moved past this. How are we still working on this as an issue? How have we not got there? And they don't know the reasons that we're still stuck there. But I think that is where the rubber's going to have to meet the road. Is there's going to be a certain point where I think it's going to be the internet and
Yeah.
stuff like this, long for podcasts, that people start to open up and there's a realization that this isn't what we had to. I don't know how many years it's going to hang on and kick and scream for. And that's what I see, right? That's what I'm talking about. This collapse, and people can see the writing on the walls. The thing are going down. They're trying to make the most money and grab as many resources as they can on their way down. I think that's what's coming with the university, with all these things. I think, like I say, with lots of these lots of these things, they're usually a systemic issue that you can see in multiple different places. I think our political system we've moved past, but we're being forced to hold on to. I think our university system we've kind of moved past, and there's better ways that we could do it, but there's so much $1 million in infrastructure and brick and mortar that there's fighting and kicking and screaming and trying to force people to from going away from it. I think COVID kind of gives that a kick in the ass too. People are going to understand that there's a better way to do these things, and a cheaper way to do these things, but it takes that. I don't know what the COVID is going to be for politics to wake up and realize that this system that we're using of just pick one side, and if you don't follow exactly what the party line is, you're ostracized and called all
Yeah.
these names on either side, right? The right doesn't and the left does it. It's ridiculous. Everybody's in the middle, from my opinion. How many people I can name on one hand that fit the bill of your typical Fox News or your typical CNN snowflake of what they're trying to describe? I know so little of those people. Well, growing up in Slave Lake, quite a few of them, but for the most part, even if you take that super right wing redneck, Stephen Harper loving guy from Slave Lake, you sit down with him for a lot of it. He really only wants things to be safe for his family. If you sat him down on gay marriage and stuff, that's not really high on his list. He might have feelings on it because of his religion, but even that, I find you don't hear that as an argument very much anymore. It's almost of a certain age, even these younger guys that have that redneck streak in them that maybe their dad was brought up, they don't really have much hate in their heart for any group. And I think that's the big change, that everyone's trying to shoehorn all these younger up and comers that are exactly what we want. So if you look at what you'd want out of your Republican Party too, is to hold those values of the taxation and the small government and all that, but move with the times. You want them to get better. But now, say, just to make that argument that I'm going down, the best argument against the people of the right is to label them as racist and bigoted, right? That's what we see every time. If someone tries to make an argument for the right, they're automatically labeled with that.
Yeah.
They don't want to admit that these upcoming right, the fact that the up and coming Republicans of tomorrow have a little more love in their heart and stuff, and aren't really hung up on some of these issues that maybe their forefathers were. That's what we want to see. That should be clapped and respected from both sides of the aisle. Everyone should love that, but it's not. They don't want that because now they've lost their chip of, now we can't put them into that box if they're not doing it. What I want to see more so of, something I wish we could do, was it seemed like in the last election in Canada, if you weren't for Trudeau, you were automatically labeled a racist or a bigot of those sort. I wish we could come up with a third party that had all the fiscal reasoning of the right, but
Mhm.
even far, but super accepting on the left. Pro gay marriage, pro all these other things that they try and label it as. It's just to show. You're trying to label us as that, but that's not who we are. We care about A, B, and C. You're trying to label us as D and F as our big issues. No, we'll even go on to your side on that, and we'll move it through, because I think if you broke it down and that's what you did, you would still, maybe you wouldn't get the real diehard, that 80-year-old that is set in his ways, and maybe you don't get those, but I think you'd bring on so many more people. I think there's such a huge burgeoning middle that has not been tapped into yet, that the 2% of people that are so far right that are the actual bigoted ones that they're trying to label the entire right as. I think if you could make it so it was a good middle ground for people, right? And almost, you never want to talk about a middle party, because it's just everyone just thinks that's the worst of both sides. They'll never look at it as the best of both sides. Everyone's first when you talk about a centrist, you always talk about flip-flop and go to but I think you just can take the best of both worlds and have it, and run to the ends of the earth. I think if there was not so many things standing in the way, I think there's so many people standing in the way of that ever becoming a thing, that it would never be allowed, because they don't want that to happen.
I mean, you guys had it. We had it 48 years ago. We're just a little late, Nick. It was called the Progressive Conservatives. But,
Right.
I don't know how that story ends.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
anything,
think
power corrupts,
mm-hmm.
and the system causes decay. And the
Right.
Progressive Conservative Party, which was brought in to tear down this old, antiquated government system that wasn't listening to people, and wasn't making the changes that needed to be changed, and wasn't tackling responsibility or tackling their responsibilities responsibly. And they changed it, and then they instituted a reform that ended up changing the entire nation politically. But we don't see those movements today. What we see, speaking as a former Wild Rose member, is beautiful grassroots movements popping up, getting corrupted by that, whatever percentage of the 47, or as you said, the 20, that identifies with that extremist movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Wild Roses, as great as a lot of their initiatives were in grassroots and trying to elevate people, the actual electorate's voices, the only people that got any traction were so and so from the representative from Tabor that said that all homosexuals should die in a lake of fire. The representative from South Edmonton that said something similar. Like it was just the bad apples, and unfortunately and then obviously Danielle Smith reared her ugly head and let it twist around 16 times, and then oh god. But anyways, what I'm trying to get at is that at least in Canada, there seems to be historical precedent for the opportunity for some political magnet introduce themselves and have that change. Because we're not, although America is not a two-party system, they might as well fucking be.
They sure are. Same with Canada. I think the whole and that's what it, and if anything gains any sort of traction there, it automatically gets sucked into whether it's whichever party is on the farthest pole. That obviously just there's pressures in place that I don't know why, but every time something like that pops up, like the Wild, eventually it's going to get amalgamated in. It becomes part of that. There's so many pressures at play at keeping it to a two-party system. I know they never call, there's other parties, but realistically, if we're going to have a real talk about it, it is a two-party. They're both two-party systems, and that is 2.5. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Well, we got to see the NDP, and but really, it's I think you're right. It does come back to it's a system that corrupts it, right? And whether it's and that might just what I'm saying of it getting sucked into the bigger party on the left or right. Maybe that is the system corrupting it in just a different way and not letting it flourish. Like you say, it's a great grassroots movement that gets certain to a point where it gets corrupted in one way or another, and the only opportunity for it is to amalgamate into something bigger or fold.
And you know what? Even the progressive conservatives ultimately had to merge with the Reform Party to become the Conservative Party of Canada. Like that was the only way for that localist movement to and sorry, I said 2.5 parties. I should say 2 and 2.5 parties because I love the Bloc Québécois as a major national party, but what a beautiful case of regionalism. I mean, like I know we're at loggerheads with the Bloc Québécois on so many issues, but like what a great case of a group of people with relatively similar beliefs just getting together and being like, yeah, you know what? Actually, we do have the clout to make a fucking, you know what? We're not going to change the law, but we're going to piss a lot of people off and slow it down. Yeah. And like, God, that was what the progressive conservatives were supposed to be for Western Canada. We were all supposed to go, you know what? We're not Quebec, we're not Ontario, but the four of us bastards together, we might be.
Yeah, exactly. And just to get a voice.
Yeah. We had sorry, go ahead, Nick. I'm cutting you off.
No, that's all right. I'm trying to learn with this. It's from one of the biggest things I get to see in editing. You get to see a visual representation of how much I interrupt because you can see this like nice long waveform of someone having a conversation, then me just interrupting and taking the whole thing over. I'm trying to be better with it. No, I forgot what I was going to say, but shit, I lost it.
Don't worry. Yeah. Well, we've done pretty well so far.
Shit. 2.5 hours in, we're still going strong.
I think we talked about. I think Machiavellian was the term I used to talk about power corrupting dodgeball, and then the importance of building community, and then sportsmanship and playing fair, which is the solution to dodgeball. And why
exactly? and if we could, instill those pillars that we had for dodgeball across the country, you'd be a much better place. But it's so funny to see, a silly little dodgeball league have it all figured out, and then you watch when you get onto the grand scale just how it just like you say gets corrupted every step of the way. Because if you ask people what they wanted it to be, that's what everyone would say. That's what everyone wants to see, but it just doesn't work that way on the grand stage.
You're born in Slave Lake here, buddy. I mean, I had the unique opportunity. I used to go for a whiskey and a cigar every Sunday in Stillwater, Oklahoma, with this old guy I met, and he was a Vietnam vet named Dale. And Dale was a Republican. Holy fuck, right? Like, Dale fought in the war. Dale wasn't afraid to tell you about it, and Dale drank and smoked, and Dale had a pretty good life. But he was a Trump fan, and nobody was going to...
Oh, fuck, what's wrong with this thing? Why do you doing this to each other?
I know.
Well, that's a whole show. What did you say right before that? Maybe the beat is setting in.
Maybe that's
Oh, your mic just went like a million decibels higher there for a little bit. Whew,
Oh,
hurt my
geez,
ears. No, it's not nothing you did. I don't know what's going on. Yeah,
no
but maybe
worries.
let's we've already been going for 2.5 hours, so let's maybe say our last piece and we'll wrap her up. What were you gonna say?
That's fair. The point I was going to think was that even Dale, set in
Hmm.
his ways, everybody in Slave Lake, hardcore right winger, the views weren't that much different. Like it was, everybody should live their best life, be as free as possible, and be left unto themselves to achieve their ultimate goal,
Hmm.
which is capitalism, which is the dream. And if we preserve life, liberty, and freedom, and we have certain social programs in place to help bolster those, that's beautiful. Left or right,
Exactly.
it's really just how we're getting there that I think is where people are getting lost, whether that's dodgeball, Canadian politics, or American politics.
Yeah, and I think something like this. I think what we've been trained all over is all everyone watching traditional media, and it's 5-minute clips of people trying to discuss this. We've lost the art of long form conversation. I think if
Yeah,
anybody, if you could take two people on the complete opposite sides of the spectrum, if you put them together for 5 hours in a room, they'll find some common ground. People are
that's right.
so much more together than they are apart. They're so much more similar than they are different. There's so much for people to dive in if you at least take that second chance. But what everyone's been programmed to is now if anybody thinks slightly different from you, label them and put them away in a jar. Don't try and take any of their opinions. Don't listen to them. They're labeled, they're put away. Now we don't have to deal with them. Now we can keep this echo chamber of what we think. Whereas
That's right.
I would love, and that's where I'm going to try and bring on some people on this podcast that maybe think a little differently than I do, and try and open myself up, because I think I'll be able to find that ground. I'll probably learn some things, and maybe I can come to a better position. But I think sitting down and at least being open to hearing the other side and approach, I know, like I said earlier, it sounds cheesy, but approaching everything with love, I think that's what's really going to make the difference. We have to have love for our fellow countrymen, our fellow, not even countrymen, just around the world. Everyone understands the benefit that would come with it. We all got taught the golden rule, but at some point we were the messaging of put everyone, label them and put them in that box and don't listen to them again, has corrupted that sense of what everyone is knows innately of. You don't have to try and explain to people that being nice is a virtue. Everyone knows that instinctively. We just got to stop listening to those people yelling at us to keep this divisiveness going and give into that natural instinct. Give everyone that that second chance. Listen to
Yeah,
them. Try and see what they have to say. If you give them that full honest college try and you still don't agree with them, at least you gave that try. And I'm sure even if you didn't agree with one thing, there's something you can pull out of it every time. And I think just the more that message can be sent, and I'm hoping that that's what this podcast kind of becomes. I'm going to need to get a little more, left and right of the side to get me maybe into that position to give them that voice too. But I think as long as it's long form and not just a quick, you have 6 heads on the news that all pop up. They have 10 minutes to have a discussion, and each person's trying to get their 30 seconds. And I think it's just programming people not to have this. And I think doing this goes a long way and really opens people's eyes. I think there's probably people that are on the opposite side of maybe where me and you are closer to, that could listen to this and take a few points of it. They probably wouldn't agree with us the whole time, but if they approached it with love and empathy, they'd be able to grab something out of it. So
that's right. And sometimes I appreciate what you're trying to achieve here, whether or not it's for personal gain, for other people's gain, or whatever it turns into be for you and for others. But the reality is, yeah, like we just gotta be a little more accepting and just listen to each other. I have a little
exactly.
less hearts and a little more love. I think that's a strong message to send, Nikki.
And I think that's a great way to end it. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I said at the start, I can't thank you enough. You really set me on a path that changed the directory of what I do. You and Brennan, and I've asked Brennan to be on the podcast too. I haven't heard back from him yet, but I am sure I'll get him on at some point. And yeah, no, I can't tell you guys enough. You really forced my hand and recognized that it'd be something that was good for me, and it changed the course of my entire life, I would say, because I learned so much in that role. And I think if I wouldn't have been forced, I was really leaning away from it. And if you guys hadn't twisted my arm like you did, I'd be a totally different person right now. So again, thank you so much. And again, thanks for being on and giving me 3 hours of your life. I really appreciate it.
Nick, it was a lot of fun. If we ever get a chance to do it again, or even just you and I, happy to do it. But and again, thanks for the flattery, and I'll always take an opportunity to bullshit dodgeball and politics. So,
Yes, sir. Awesome. Thanks. I'm sure you'll be
all
on
right,
again.
buddy. Good seeing you up in Grand Prairie, buddy. You stay safe.
All right. Thanks. You too.
Take her easy.
There you have it. Episode 5 of the VonDubCast with Bill Pickering. Thank you guys for sticking around, and like always, send any feedback to VonDubCast@gmail.com. Still looking for some intro music, any help with the editing process, GarageBand tips, anybody you know that is maybe you think could help me out in any way, shape, or form. I would appreciate all the help I can get, because I don't pretend to be an expert by any means. So yeah, once again, thanks to all you listeners out there, and I'll see you next week. Bye!